Well, it is 5 o'clock and I'd like to resume the Finance Committee. This is June 2nd. It's currently 5 o'clock. Tonight, sitting on this committee is Councilor Cobus and Reynolds. I see Councilor Cobus. I see Councilor Reynolds is absent. Tonight, we will be going through the library, followed by the treasurer, recreation, forestry, the assessor, and end with fire. The collector has taken ill and will be absent tonight, and due to the schedule and the time compression of our review, she will not be included in our review sessions this year. So I see Amy is on board. Welcome, Amy. You're up first. Amy, we begin these conversations with a discussion from the department heads about the economic pressures facing the department. And the department heads have done a wonderful job of isolating things like personnel or contracts or inflation or fuel or etc. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to kind of like talk about what's been going on with your budget, what you've seen going on outside that's affecting the future economics of the library, and the floor is yours.
Sure, thank you. And I first want to apologize. Charlie Oliver wanted to be here tonight, but had another engagement. The biggest thing that we see right now is personnel. I've been at the library for 20 years, the last 7 as an administrator. We have never had as many people unavailable to work for a variety of reasons, as we have in this past year. We had 4 babies born to 3 staff members in the last 2 years. We had a number of parents of staff members die. We've had surgeries with long recoveries. It's nothing I've ever seen, so that even when we hope to call somebody from our staff in to cover a hole, there's not even anyone to call. We now have an emergency policy in place. Sometimes we can't cover our reference desk. The way staffing here works, we have 20 staff members, but at various grades, because of library procedures and because of union rules. Only certain people are allowed to cover the reference desk. So if we have a day when there's only 1 reference person available, typically happens on Saturdays, we've had to close once just to give that person a lunch break. And so we've gotten so close to closing the library so many times that we now have a sort of standing procedure with the mayor and an email ready to go to patrons saying, if you come and the doors are locked, please call or email. The rest of the staff is available to help you as best they can. I mean, one thing we learned during COVID was how to do curbside service and how to make the most of what we can do with the building closed. That's been our biggest struggle. And, everyone's revolving desks. If we have to put somebody in the children's room who doesn't typically work with children and they get asked about octonauts or the binturang at Cape and Park Zoo, they don't know what's going on. And it's just the service to the community stinks.
So this is going to make it even a bigger challenge if you're going to try to restore that 15-hour reference library position.
No, so that what that 15-hour position will do, so they will be qualified to work all of the public service desks. So at the grade 5 is the lowest grade that can cover reference, children's, or the circulation desk. And so that's 15 hours that we will be able to cover, and we'll carefully schedule them. So it is Saturdays. Saturdays are required, and put them at the lower staff periods of our schedule.
So we're hearing what you're talking about from just about every department head.
Yep.
This is a universal issue. Besides personnel, is the library facing other financial challenges?
We're doing okay. Inflation, we are, and Rick, I think you'll appreciate this, we are Yankees. We will, we know how to stretch a dollar. We've been doing this for a very long time.
I can't believe you've been there for 20 years.
because I'm
That-
like 26.
That went
Me
by
and my
in a
reading glasses, me and
yeah.
the chief with the reading glasses and the budget pages. I understand.
That went by in a flash. Those 26 years. I mean, I still remember you at the museum.
Mhm.
Well, your expenditures from last year look pretty good. You've been running a pretty tight ship, like a good old Yankee. I don't recall any transfers during the course of the year into your department from other sources, and maybe Deb has a different take on that. But you ended your year probably giving money back to the city, because you're probably not going to spend all your money this year. Am I correct? You know better than me.
She'll be
Deb
close.
is shaking her head.
Amy, obviously you can take that. I think you're going to be close. I think there's been some internal transfers, particularly for lights and power from heat, because there's been obviously some changes with the building envelope project.
Mhm.
You can see that that's the third bullet under their proposed changes for the current budget year. They have, the new HVAC and building improvements, and they, their budget for next year reflects a modest, what looks like an increase, but it's actually less than what they've spent this year. So I'm a little concerned about that. And then there was, because I have on the current, there was the new computer transfer that was not part of their original appropriation. So if I pull up, excuse me, that account number, I can tell you when the council voted that.
So Amy, if I could just interrupt you, Deb, for a moment.
Yep.
When I was last in the library, you gave me a 10-cent tour,
Mhm.
and there were computers all over the place, from
Sensata.
Sensata. Thank you. Have you been able to put all those to work and re-establish your network?
Yes. So what we could use from Sensata have been put into place both for the public and for the staff members. You did see a lot of sort of old Deb computers as well. And also it was desktops that were being used for our servers. So those will eventually be taken out, because we have the beautiful new servers that fit into a wall-sized cabinet in a more appropriate location in the building.
And that is probably what Deb was referring to on the new computer transfer, was
Right.
that?
It was like $33,000.
Yeah,
or
for
so.
servers.
Yep, the servers,
On,
which I saw. They're teeny, tiny, unbelievable, small servers.
Mhm.
Does anyone have any questions for Amy? Amy, you're getting off. Oh, there's
Right,
Council
come on.
Hogus.
Nope. No. My only question was just about the HVAC with the new building, and in your documentation, you answered that we're going to keep things the same this year, and we'll adjust fire in upcoming years after we have a good understanding of what the costs are with the new building. Is that accurate? Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, so we have two lines. The heating line is actually the gas bill. So we have virtually no need for gas with the new system. It's only for the limited hot water that we use. But our electric bill is much higher. But we believe that will be offset, and Jeremy can speak better to this, with solar programs coming into the city.
Yeah. So if I can follow up on that. So yeah, just that we can make the internal transfers between heating and lights and power as we see what kind of a steady state is under the new system. With the solar, I think I have a page turn legal meeting tomorrow with our vendor. So one of the sites that we're putting solar at is the North Main parking lot right there at the library. And with sites that we have an offtake, a demand, we have power purchase agreements for the 20-year agreement with solar, where we're able to lock in a price and purchase below open market rates. So the library will be taking advantage of that. That legal wrangling and back and forth has taken a little bit longer than anticipated for solar. The council will be involved as we get closer on scheduling and signing multi-year agreements and whatnot. But so I can't say exactly when the library is going to start to benefit from that. But yes, they absolutely will.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So Amy, when was the last time the library did a review of its fees?
Like what we charge for fees?
Yeah, I
Like
mean,
for-
you basically wiped out late book fees, right?
Yes.
So do you have any other fees at all?
We charge for lost books. I mean, that's easy enough, right? You don't return it, you have to pay for it. We don't charge fees. I mean, that's part of the basic library service at the MBLC it has to be free and open to all. I mean, there are some libraries that charge $1 or $2 for like sort of specialty items, but I mean, that was DVDs back in the day, and DVDs are not specialty items. It was really nothing. So what we are going to be doing, we haven't charged late fees since the library closed for COVID and the renovations. Because we were closed, we were open, the book drop was closed. And the board has decided going forward in the new fiscal year to not just, that's our standard operating procedure. We're not going to charge these 10 cent a day fines because we know that they don't make things come in on time. People who have late things are always going to have late things. And people are horrified that they have $1.20 on their card, and so they stop coming into the library. We hear it every day. I can't go to the grocery store without someone stopping me to say, Amy, I'm going to get that book to you right away.
You know, right after I asked the question, I realized it was a stupid question because you're a free library.
Mm-hmm.
But
But at one point, I mean, you know, people think that it you know, teachers' responsibility and all those things. But in 2022, it's a huge, there's families in Attleboro who can't afford, if you take a pile of children's books home for your 4 kids, that those fees add up, and then you're embarrassed to come in. It's not worth it. Those kids need books.
Oh, I'm
Yep.
well aware. I mean, the Conti family uses the library frequently. I mean, it's a wonderful resource,
Mhm.
and there's no leaks anymore, which is really nice,
Yes, it is.
and really air conditioning. Does anyone else have anything for Amy? Amy, is there anything that you want to talk about that's coming up in the next year?
I would say 2 more things. The other thing with personnel is safety. Our building is 3 floors open to the public. And if we only have people on the desks, at the circ desk and the children's desk and the reference desk, that's 4 people covering 3 floors. Presumably they are answering phones and working with patrons. There are a lot of quiet corners for people to get their work done. Those quiet corners are also available to people doing less productive activities. And it is something that we work with every day. People have this wonderful feeling about the library, how wonderful it is to the community. But I'll tell you that when I was promoted to director, the first congratulatory text I got was from Steve Bodette from the POP unit. That's how often we were in touch because of the things that happen at the library. And we have a joke of, it's been 3 days since we've had to call the police. The staff takes that reputation that libraries have very seriously. We want you to be able to drop your kids off and know that they are safe and not being approached by strangers. I could tell you stories, but we only have a few minutes left.
And I don't think I want to hear them tonight.
But that's what library staff is doing, and they do take it very seriously. And we work very closely with other city departments to keep the building safe. And then finally, I want to say that we talk a lot about the requirements we have to get state aid, and one of those things is hours open to the public. Every year we get knocked a few $1,000s because we are not currently open enough hours. The minimum for a city of our size is 59 hours, and we are open 56 hours. As soon as we break the 50,000 citizen mark, and we're getting closer every year, we have to be open 63 hours. And so we will get docked a bigger amount of state aid. And again, it's just that Attleboro is not meeting the minimum state requirement for a city of our size for library hours.
So you really need to address this personnel issue, because you're not going to get to 59 hours without more people.
Right.
So that should become one of your fiscal 23 objectives is to, and I don't see it on your list, but we're going to add it. I'm putting it in right now that you got a
Perfect.
personnel issue. Does anyone else have anything else for Amy? Yes, President Delizio.
Thanks,
You have
Rick.
the floor.
Amy, great to see you. Nice job as always. Just clarification, you're not asking for additional positions. You're just asking for the ability to be able to go through and staff what you had prior to the pandemic in order for us to get to that threshold, which in turn would get us more grant money and assistance, correct?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you for coming out. I'll be by for another tour soon.
I would love to give you something better than the 10-cent tour. And we are having a celebration on June 25th ahead of the Expo for the Senses from 2 to 4. The building will be open for people to see the new sites.
I promise you I'll be
You'll get
there.
invitations.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
So Jay, can you let in the treasurer? Is Laura available to us? Councilor Cobus, or is it Councilor Delizio? Who's managing my, or is it double ACS?
I think Jim Jones has
I
it.
think Jim is here, yeah.
There's Laura, I see her.
Good evening. How are
Laura,
you?
good to see you. Laura, you're a little different because you're our treasurer, but through these budget sessions, what we've done is we've asked department heads to isolate the major factors that are affecting the budget in their department and the city. And for you, that's an elevated conversation because your responsibility goes way beyond your own department. It's my current thinking after hearing, we're in our last leg of these hearings, that the city should be maximizing its income, that it should be doing everything that it can to maximize its income, particularly in a period of high inflation, supply chain shortages, and personnel issues, which we're hearing across the board. So I'm going to not speak for you, but I'm going to want to give you the opportunity to address what you see as the major factors financially affecting us in fiscal year 23.
Thank you. I think some of the major factors, as you indicated, would be inflation. Also, rates. Rates are going up. So we've borrowed strategically in order to capture whatever rates we could before the market started to rise with the rates. As far as personnel, I don't have any issues. I have a great staff. I'm fully staffed. I'm happy to report that. As far as the budget, there's not many changes that I have. I'm pretty level funded except in one area, which is professional services. And that was a conversation that I had with Jeremy Stull year over year, that I am asking for more money. And the reason for that is the amount of files that I have with Mike Siddell at Siddell and Siddell. I keep those files pretty even, and I am constantly, when one falls off, I'm putting another one on. If you look back in 2015, 2016, 2017, you can see that really wasn't happening. You can see when I came to the city of Attleboro as treasurer, I started to push the files through because we had so many files. We were in excess of 354 tax title files in the office. I'm happy to say we are approximately 130 files right now. So we've reduced that significantly. And we're working some old files of things that have been sitting around forever. So we do a combination of new files and old files. So the reason for my ask for to have more money to start out with, because I'm consistently asking every year for this money, and why shouldn't it be in the budget itself?
Laura, can we address what's behind that on the tax title files? I recall way back before you came to the city that the former treasurer was spending a lot of time in negotiation on the tax titles. And because your numbers have come way down, I suspect you're doing the same thing. Has the number of tax title potential files risen in the last 5 years as a result of outside forces?
It really hasn't risen. I mean, the amount that were in the office were in excess, because some of the files, we have people that have passed away. Some of them are just wetlands. Some are just files that haven't moved in a long time. But when the collector sends up the files, it's pretty, it stays the same every year around November. So we try to work those files right away. And with a combination of old files, we do have some files that are just, you know, like that are contaminated. So they're going to sit there at this point in time. And files that owe a lot of money that make up a large portion of what's on the tax title.
Do you recall whether there is a notable percentage of unknown owners in those tax title files?
There's a notable percentage, yes. Most of them are unknown or deceased. We have a tax title that has 23 heirs. So you can imagine the amount of time and effort that takes to notify all 23 heirs on that particular property. That has been in my attorney's office since the time I started here. That's how long it's taken. And it's still pending in land court.
That's a nightmare.
Yeah, it is a nightmare.
So we think 55,000 might do it, but you might be back to us even for more.
I expect I will. Sedell and Sedell is great for going, to court for us, for filing petitions for us. This year alone, they have actually collected $366,000 for the city of Attleboro. In total, we have $624,000 that the collector, the treasurer and Sedell have done together. So they've done slightly over half of what we haven't been able to collect by ourselves. So you can see that my ask is generating money back to the city.
A lot of money.
Yes.
That's wonderful. On the rates, you said the rates are increasing. Are we seeing a rapid rise, or is it?
Well, if you listen to the Fed, they are increasing it, 0.25% over a period of time. But that's definitely something where we've just borrowed in May. So we had a strategic conversation about how much should we borrow? Should we go long-term now to capture that rate? So we did some of that when we did borrow in May, just to make sure that we could optimize the savings to the city. We're always looking for opportunities like that when we go out and talk about borrowing. Where are the rates? Would this be better to borrow short-term now, long-term later? So it's a strategic conversation that we have with our finance team.
Are you also shopping around for banks that give us interest on money that we're sitting on?
Absolutely. So I constantly have banks that reach out to me and say, I'll give you this rate or that rate. And sometimes I won't go towards that. And it just depends. Sometimes it's the service that counts more than the rate. So you always have to remember that. You don't want to be jumping around rate to rate to rate all the time. But when an opportunity arises, I certainly analyze that and say, okay, that might be worth our time to do that. And I have some money that I don't need right now. Maybe I'll put some there.
Are you seeing as much activity in the rising of the rates there as you are in borrowing, or is it lopsided?
It's fairly lopsided still. I did have a bank reach out to me to offer me a rate and ask if I had any money that I had that could be, freed up to put over there for a period of time. So I did see that, but only one bank. I have another bank that actually wants to limit the amount of money that I put in the bank.
So
they're
how
flush
much
with
money
cash.
are we talking like $25 million here?
Yeah, approximately a little bit more. Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions for Laura? Laura, look at you.
Wow. That's awesome.
Wow.
I'm winning today.
What are you doing, Laura?
I don't know.
Keep it up. It's working.
Thank you very much.
Are we moving on to debt at all, or are we just?
Yeah,
doing
let's
tax
talk
title
about
and
debt.
comment?
Sure, we've all got the debt Bible. Let me just reach around here and grab
Oh,
mine.
yes.
I don't want to ask about debt if that was the.
Deb, you got the
Cheers.
floor.
No, I just want, Laura mentioned that we just did another borrowing. I didn't know if any of the counselors had any questions On debt, I mean, the group does a lot of work and Laura does a lot of work on debt, so I didn't know if anybody wanted to at least touch base on it. It's a significant portion of the overall budget.
I have a lot of questions, Deb, but I don't know if they're appropriate for this forum. I want to talk to you about the Schedule A Part 1, general fund revenues and other financing sources that are on the City of Attleboro Gateway Schedule A, all parts. And I wanted to talk to you about the 3-part memo that you mailed out on April 30th about, it was to President Delisio and I about RAP and federal assistance and one-time assistance for districts. We'll get into that, I think, offline.
Okay. Yeah, because the RAP would have nothing to do with debt. I'd
Right.
have to see what else was in that, because I'd have to look for my memo from April 30th. And the Schedule A, Part 1, which is general fund revenue, typically has nothing to do with debt, so I'll have to pull that,
Right.
which I can happily do. Jeremy, I think you had sent out to all of the counselors this morning the fiscal 23 general fund debt statistics.
Yeah, I had done that a little earlier. So let me pull that up and I'll share it on the screen and we can talk.
I know there's some interest. I think it's just important, particularly if there's folks looking. Laura, we're pretty much at this point. Can you just kind of update everybody where we are with the debt exclusion? Obviously, it's the biggest debt that we've done in the city, where we are. And I don't think for fiscal 23, at least in the fall, we'll be back to the council, which is unusual. We've been back the last couple of years, right? But we'll be waiting on that because we're getting closer to, close out and buttoning things up, right?
Yeah, so as far as the debt exclusion, we've pretty much borrowed the lion's share of the debt exclusion. So it would be safe to say we've reached our peak per se, where it will be the largest point of taxes. At this particular point in time, we're not looking to borrow any additional funds because we need to wait for the final audit, which I don't expect, with speaking with Jeremy and checking on that project, most likely wouldn't be till 2024 to 2025, and it would be a minimal amount. So, the expectation is that that should not be a very large amount at all. It's just we have to wait for the final audit.
So just for everybody's greater understanding, we will have to carry an amount as short-term debt that we won't be paid from the MSBA until after final audit, which typically takes, a year or so at least after final completion of the project. And the state will go through all of the records that are here in the city and that they've actually already received before they'll release their last 5% retainage. And anything that's a change order could be reviewed and considered at that.
Jeremy, did you send this slide that's currently on the screen out to the councils today?
I sent it last week.
I
can resend it to you.
Yeah, because I don't remember, and I'm trying to get into my email now to look, to see if I missed it. And I'm having trouble with that too. So if you would resend it, please.
Yep, I will do that after tonight's meeting.
My question to Laura, the total debt service as a percent of the operating budget is 6.25. That includes the debt exclusion, correct?
That's correct. But if you back out the debt exclusion, it is 2.4%. Looking back at a 4-year look back at debt Bibles and what kind of debt we've been carrying, that's pretty consistent currently. So if I were to look back, 2023, we're carrying about 64 million, and that's just not including the debt exclusion, the citywide debt. FY22, it was 62 million. FY21 is 61 million. Obviously, I'm rounding. It's not obviously that amount, but in FY20, it was 64 million. So you can see that we're pretty consistent with our debt. As something falls off, we try to put something back on, pretty much similar to what was coming off.
So earlier in the year, the mayor was saying that he wanted to expand that we have been pretty conservative in the total debt service as a percentage of the operating budget.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give me a feeling for what that is in other cities our size? Do you
I
know?
haven't pulled other cities of our size. However, I am of the opinion that we should stay slow and steady, and I don't feel that we should add more debt. This is my opinion. When talking with the S&P, we're in a pretty good position. I don't think adding additional debt is a great idea. I think doing what we've done throughout the last several years, they've been happy with. So I don't feel like adding more is a wise move. I say staying consistent, and as things fall off, adding additional debt at that time to level it off, I think is a good plan.
Okay. And as for the enterprise, which is the other side, it's not included in this. Have you looked at the enterprise debt service and budgets?
I have not reviewed them in full, no, but I do see on the debt Bible that they do have things coming off. One more than the other. So I think it's timing. Those are conversations that we have in finance committee to say, hey, where's this project? Well, we might want to borrow something short term instead of long term, so something can fall off in the next year. So it is a conversation that is strategically had with that committee quite frequently.
Got it. And all of this debt that we're looking at now, this is all on the old interest rates. So we haven't done anything recently with the new rates, correct?
Just the borrowing in May, correct?
Like this month.
And that was AHS issue number 4.
Oh, that was multiple pieces of debt. We had water, wastewater, we had city. Yeah, okay, Jeremy's highlighting it for
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Yep. I see it.
Yeah, so the
Thank you,
second,
Jeremy.
the second library issue, the second middle school issue, which we also had for the elementary school gym floors, and then some water and wastewater stuff as well.
The I&I, the Deanville,
SCADA.
the SCADA, the wastewater.
And
And-
these Laura, these debts, these recent debts, if we were to pay them off early, is there a penalty?
You can't pay them off early. A lot of these we went long term on, so you have to term them out. And there is a point in time where you can look at maybe refunding or looking at maybe refinancing that, but we're not even close to that point this time.
Got it. Jeremy, thank you for sharing the screen and thank you for highlighting, but I'd like to see everybody else because I want to ask anybody. I see Councilor Cobus wants the floor and you've got it.
Sure. In Councilor Conti, excellent line of questions, and your questions regarding debt services were exactly what I was looking at. And it was interesting for me to see that we were at $2.5 million for the last essentially 3 years, or last 2 years, and then projected for fiscal year 23, which in my mind, with the 2.5% growth, means that our percentage of debt service appears to be going down, not increasing, and that's concerning to me. So I appreciate that you brought that up. My only other,
I think that's because you and I have had these financial conversations for several years and you've trained me how to ask the questions. Thank you.
Yes. And then, so Laura, my question for you is the remaining debt for the high school that we'll be bringing on. I know a long time ago when we were first talking about these bonds, we talked about doing them as, I think it was level
It's level debt.
as opposed so is that still the plan to move forward
That's
with level
correct.
debt?
Yep, that's
Okay.
how we've borrowed it all throughout. Every tranche that we've done is level debt.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. I
You're
just wanted
welcome.
to double check that was still the plan. And all right.
Absolutely.
Jeremy, I thought you had your hand up. Would you like the floor?
Yes, thank you. 2 pieces on debt. So prior to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in 2017, we could do advanced refundings of tax-exempt municipal debt, which meant if we had, we were paying 4% on a 30-year bond, and then 10 years in, interest rates were 2%, we could refund that bond and take out a 20-year bond for the same thing. With the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, you cannot do advanced refundings. You can't have 2 issues for the same project. unless you're within, I think it's 90 or 180 days of maturity, which essentially wipes out the ability to do that. So now the IRS and the administration at the time was concerned with multiple tax exempt holdings for folks. So our ability to do advanced refundings is essentially nil now. On the debt service as a percentage of budget, Councilor Kobus made the point, if we keep the dollar figure fixed at $61, $62 million, whatever it is, in total debt, and so that means our debt service is relatively stable each year, but our baseline budget keeps increasing, then our debt service as a percentage of our budget goes down. So it's the administration's position that we would like to add somewhat to the debt service as a percentage of budget, and that means adding more debt than falls off because our general fund budget is going up every year too. That doesn't happen linearly, depending on project schedules, depending on borrowing timing, depending on interest rates, all sorts of things. But that's the general approach of the administration. Those are my only two.
Thank you.
If I still
Go
have the
ahead,
floor,
Counselor.
just
Yes.
I hear the words that that's the approach of the administration, but that doesn't appear to be the reality of the last 3 years. So I'm just expressing my concern with that. And I know I'm a broken record with this, but I just bringing it up again.
You're sounding more and more like Councilor Conti. Councilor Delicio, did you have your hand up?
I did, thank you. And Todd, thank you for bringing up the debt service, and that's actually something that we've talked on this committee over the years several times. Laura, the question for you, kind of along the same vein, is over the first several months of this council and the last several months of the previous council, we used a lot of the free cash, the record free cash we had, paying off buying vehicles for different departments, recreation, DPW, which I think in certain cases would have been bonded for. Can you talk about the impact that the positive impact that could have on the S&P rating, the bond rating rather?
Yeah, so our last S&P rating was very positive. They talked about perhaps looking at increasing that depending on performance of the city. Didn't say how likely that was, but they said that, in the next year or so, and Jeremy could probably also speak to that, that they may look at doing that. One thing that hurts us was our OPEB contribution. That hurts everybody. It's not just the city of Attleboro, that's every city in town. So, obviously if we don't bond for vehicles, we use free cash. I have mixed feelings about that. I'm not going to lie. I feel like utilizing all the free cash in a time where we've had COVID and a lot of uncertainties, that I don't know if we should utilize all of our free cash. I would like to see some of it head to our stabilization fund, to be quite honest with you. But that is my opinion. Might not be everybody's, but just based on the uncertainty of the world, you just don't know what's going to happen. And I don't feel like you could spend all the money that you have just because you have it.
If I could respond to that last sentiment, please, Councilor Conti.
Please do.
I could not agree more. I've been beating that drum for months and months and months. I think, just because we have it doesn't mean we should spend it. I've been saying I'd like to see more. And I think we've done a nice job of putting money into the stabilization, but I agree with you. We don't know what the next 2 years are going to look like. To me, that's scary. Which is why I think when we had the opportunity to pay cash for some of the pieces of equipment, some of the projects, some of the vehicles that ordinarily might have been bonded for. I think we had that opportunity. I think it's a balancing act. But as Councilor Blair has said several times, when you can pay for it in cash as opposed to bonding for it, you have to look at that seriously, especially now with where the rates are going. So thank you for your sentiments there. Councilor Conti, that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. I knew what you were going to say before you said it. Laura, I need to talk to you offline between now and my next committee meeting. And Councilor Kobus and Councilor Delicio, I'm thinking of inviting Jeremy Scull to my first committee meeting in June as we digest what we've learned in craft. there's some big issues that I want to address, and this isn't the format to do it, but the next committee meeting is. So be prepared for that. I'm going to probably chew up a little bit more time in my first committee meeting in June to discuss this budget message and what I'm thinking, and I'm going to try to circulate that out to all of you in advance so that you have something to work off of. Council Delacio, go ahead.
All I would say is if that's what you want to do and you're going to have guests, let's just make sure that Virginia knows so she can have you go first.
Yeah. Does anyone have questions for the treasurer? Deb Gould, you have the floor.
I just wanted to follow up on a couple of points from my colleagues. So it is a pretty big undertaking, timing everything out and making sure, like, so we have conversations about the short-term issue, the long-term issue, what the city can afford to come onto the budget. Those involve the outside financial advisor to the city who works for UFASI, what is Unibank?
Unibank.
Thanks, Linda. Thanks, Laura. So Lynn joins us in those conversations. You probably have seen, or because I've copied you on the memos to the mayor, I think there's about 10 different funds that we're cleaning up, small capital project funds. Some of those were all funded from free cash. Some of them might have been things that have economic life that Laura and I went over to make sure that if there were small bits and pieces left from borrowings, we're cleaning those up. We just finished today posting some information on the most recent ban and bond that the city did. And Laura and I will review those. And there's a possibility if we can clean up some more debt to either rescind or close out some more funds between now and June 30th. We'd like to do that to make some of our year-end reporting to the Department of Revenue as clean as possible. Frankly, we're not sure we'll get to it with our schedules, but we're hopeful. So there might be some more of that. The other thing Laura touched upon, S&P and their mentioning of OPEB and the level of funding efforts that the city puts into that. I'd also like to point out that for one of the very first times ever, one of the questions that S&P asked us at the most recent rating had to do with compensated absences for the city. So if you take a look at the city's financial statements when they're issued again, you will see what that liability is on the books. And it's the first time in over 2 decades that S&P has started to ask those questions. So there is recognition on the part of the outside world about what the liabilities of the city are and what we have on our books. So the only final comment, and it's small, but in the scheme of things, but the capital fund that this administration has put into the budget of $500,000, ordinarily that $500,000 would be part of debt service because those things would have, so, and we're not including that in the numbers to look at. And in addition, the police department budget has a line item for vehicles. Again, historically, that would have been borrowed. So there's, another 680, or I don't know the number from the police budget off the top of my head. I'd have to look at it. I know this year was 180,000. I don't know what you put in for next year off the top of my head, Jeremy, but
210.
Excuse me. Okay, so that 500 and that 210 would be another $710,000 that historically would have fallen into the debt service category. Just for statistical analysis, we're not necessarily looking at apples to apples because the administration is doing that kind of stuff. So I just wanted to at least mention that. Your point is well made, Councilor Kovas, that as a percentage, it's smaller. Level is smaller.
So Deb, you just confused me because for the last few years, we've been paying for that $500,000 capital improvements out of free cash. And sliding that in this year's budget was that justification, is that it's been free cash. And so by putting it in the slot that Jeremy put it in this year, it was never meant to be borrowed.
Right. Where it is now, it's never meant to be borrowed. You're 100% correct. However, in the past, in previous administrations, it wouldn't necessarily be free cash that was used for a project. It may have been the policy to let's borrow for it, or even Mayor Haro could say, hey, you know what? There's multiple conversations that happen about should we borrow for it? Should it come from free cash? And then, it might, some of those conversations involve simply how much is the project? What is the forecast for the project? Some of it's timing, but 100% historically, I think it's pretty fair to say in recent years, the acquisition of the police cruisers would have been a short-term note. And we would not have gone long-term on that. But what would have happened is we'd done a pay down, and that pay down would have been in the debt section. So at least 210,000 of what you're seeing in a line item as a 5.8 capital within the police department budget for many years would have been in your debt service budget. And although you can absolutely disagree with me, and you're accurate in doing so, some of the $500,000 things that we're buying from the budget, which is budgeted money or free cash, what you said it would have been free cash, may have been things we would have borrowed. I just want to point out that, you know what, it's not necessarily just an apples to apples. We need to at least consider those other types of things that, you know, before we would have always borrowed for it. And now we're trying to say, we shouldn't pay for all of our capital needs and borrow it. We save up some money. You put money in the stabilization fund to defray part of the high school cost. You know, you're putting $210,000 in the budget to defray something that historically would have been borrowed, and you'd pay principal and interest on that. You're not anymore. You're paying just for the cost of the acquisition of the vehicles and the things that outfit them. So
Laura,
I hope I didn't make it worse.
well, Laura, if you're still here,
I'm here.
there you are. Our free cash has been growing in recent years, and it's been growing in part because of the way that we budget our income. We budget our income more conservatively, and as a result, we wind up with more free cash. And that makes it a little bit harder to see a balanced budget where the income matches the expenditures, because we're using the free cash for those three things. And Jeremy's slide escapes me at the moment, but does Standard & Poor or the bond rating agencies even look at that?
I've never had them mention that, but Deb has been here longer than I have, so I'll let her answer that.
Okay, Deb?
So when Standard & Poor's does their analysis, and Jeremy, you can speak to the analysis side of it, right? Because he did that for a living for some time for another company. But everything with Standard & Poor's is they look at the financial statements on a GAAP basis. So on a GAAP basis, when they look at the general fund and they look at our balance sheet and how much money do we have, everything's rolled into one, right? So on a balance sheet that, like, you look at when I give you the financial statements, you don't see the snow deficit, because on a GAAP basis, that's pushed through equity in the year that the deficit was, right? So they don't look at it like that. They know what it is because we disclose it, and they see my balance sheet as well that goes to the state. They also look at in totality all stabilization. So when you look at the reserves and the equity balance in the general fund, you'll notice that that includes the stabilization fund, the regular stabilization fund, the SPED stabilization fund. So they look at all available resources of the city when they're doing the analysis of how much we have, what position we're in. They'll look at what's restricted. So obviously if it's grant money, they show that on the balance sheet in a different column, but they know that's restricted. We can't use that for debt. So S&P looks at a variety of things. They also do look at our local receipts, and they like that we are conservative on our local receipts, so that we have. That would be my interpretation of their response to what we tell them. Like, they appreciate the fact that we're somewhat conservative on our local receipts, and that it lends itself to have free cash at the end of the year. Because if you're conservative, right, we're conservative because we're hitting the mark and we're going over. But if there's a downturn in the economy and you are conservative, then you're not under, you know? I mean, so we've been fortunate that we've been above. And some of the significant free cash that was available to the city in the last year is absolutely directly related to steps we took at the end of 2020 and things that happened that, you know, bolstered the overall position of the city. We stopped spending some money. You know, there were some things that didn't happen. The school department turned back money that's unheard of. They're not going to turn back the same type of money this year. You know, we were very conservative in some of the, I'm saying very conservative, but we had no idea if people were going to go to restaurants in the next year, right? You know, so we were conservative in meals taxes. We also benefited from the cannabis coming online, and we had the impact fee. So those are things that now have, you know, kind of gone back to the norm, or what we thought were the norm for the fiscal year. And I think the administration did a good job in looking at and trying to forecast the local receipts, which is the biggest part of the fiscal 23 budget process. That's kind of the unknown. You know, what can we move around? I mean, we get taxes, right? We all know the levy. That's the taxes that we send out. And then we also have the state aid, which we know the numbers currently at least proposed, right? And then everything else is kind of indirects, other available sources that we have, and the local receipts. And I know some people think that we're too conservative in the local receipts. I don't. I mean, I'm part of the team that has to get the tax rate approved at the end of the calendar year, close to the November, December timeframe. And if you're too aggressive on a local receipt, you might not get the tax rate approved through the Department of Revenue, particularly in a year that, you know, I think you know better than most, Councilor Conti. We've talked multiple times about what are you seeing with motor vehicle excise coming forward. I mean, there was a whole part of the recent past where you couldn't buy a new vehicle if you wanted to. So what is that going to do to future revenues there? So
I was called into the mayor's office last week for exactly that subject. So I got it.
I don't think the administration's approach to local receipts is outlandish. I think that we are historically somewhat conservative, but we've been able to benefit from that going forward. And the administration has, Jeremy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say that your approach is to incorporate the recurring revenue related to cannabis in a fashion where, like, you're starting to put it on trend, but somewhat conservatively, because we're a neighbor community to the state of Rhode Island. And if Rhode Island legalizes cannabis, how much of our cannabis money right now that we're enjoying the excise tax on that is actually not going to continue to come into the Commonwealth? Or North Attleboro opened a cannabis recreational and medical facility, I think, recently. I mean, if every facility that was opened in the area opened in the city of Attleboro, right, it wouldn't matter to us which store somebody went to. But if they're going to North Attleboro, that's revenue loss to the city. If they're staying in Rhode Island, that's revenue loss to Rhode Island. So while we saw like a big jump this year, we've got some great money that came in as well, but we have no idea what's going to happen in fiscal 23. So we can't budget what we got this year. It would be irresponsible of us to do so.
Right, got it.
I don't know if
Thank
that
you for
answered the
It
question.
does answer my question. Jeremy, thank you for the screen. Does anyone have any questions for Laura? I didn't think so. So thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
We will talk because I want Lynn's name at Unibank Advisor. I want her name and number. Thank you.
Sure, I'd be happy to give it to you. Thank you. Have a good, nice night.
Bye-bye. Next up is recreation, I believe.
Council Conti,
Yes.
I just wanted to let you know that debt statistics email was Thursday.
Oh, you found it. Okay. Let me
Yeah,
see
so
if I
just, so if you wanted to look for it, it came in Thursday.
Okay. and
I
if we-
also just resent it during that discussion, so it'll be at the top of your inboxes.
Thank you.
But thank you,
Thank
Councilor
you.
Dolan.
Dennis, welcome.
Thank you.
You knew that you would not come in on time.
Jeremy says I'm the first one.
Sorry.
Oh, good.
Dennis, if you would please take the floor and explain to the counselors the major factors, financial factors that are affecting your department going into this budget. We'd like to hear that first off.
Well, obviously, we're having the same concerns that I'm sure you've heard from most departments with respect to inflation. Notably for us, it's been supplies have gone through the roof. Fertilizers up, closing up now on 75%. Seed is 75%. Lime, which is another, we use quite a bit of 20%. So that's been the biggest hit to us, and where a lot of the increased request is. Also, another area we have is maintenance of rec areas. I've asked for a larger amount this year. We have a kind of a 5-year plan to get us up to $50,000 when we started at 10. And Mayor Haru has been very good on this, as the council, and especially yourself, Councilor Conti, helping us, realizing that the more we can spend on protecting investments we have, the less we'll have to pay for repairs down the road. You've seen a lot the last couple of years doing playgrounds over and basketball courts. And, if we could seal coat them on a regular basis as part of the regular operating budget at maybe $4,000 or $5,000, then we don't have to redo, a new basketball court for $35,000 or $40,000 down the road. So we're starting to build that part of the budget up, which I think is very penny wise. The other areas that we have this year that we're trying to open up, we are planning on opening the third pool again this year. Twin Village has been closed for 2 years. The first year due to COVID, and last year due to the inability to hire lifeguards. So we are asking to open up the third pool this summer. And so we've asked for a little bit more money in the what we call the salary program assistance, which is our lifeguard line. We're fortunate that Tim's done a nice job, Tim Killian, and we believe we have sufficient lifeguards to open the 3 pools that the city now has. 2 we own, 1 we manage for the Department of Conservation and Recreation for the state of Massachusetts.
So it sounds like the personnel issues are not affecting your department so seriously.
Well, I wouldn't say that. For example, we have a summer laborer, and we've had trouble getting that position filled for someone to come in for us. And but overall, full-time employees, et cetera, we have not had an issue, no. And for the summer help, for the lifeguards at least, we haven't. Part of that is we did a little preemptive strike. We actually held a free lifeguard class at the close of last summer. We kept the pool open for an additional week when it wasn't available to the public, but we held lifeguarding course free to Attleboro residents who were interested, with a commitment to come back and work for us, for this summer. So after having the shortage last year, we said, how do we prevent it next year? So we gave away the free course, which, someone can go flip burgers at McDonald's for, $15 an hour versus come be a lifeguard here for $15 an hour. And you have to pay $400 for the course to be a lifeguard. It just doesn't work. I'm sure you've read about it. It's a national problem. So I thought that was a good program we ran in conjunction with the YMCA. So we had enough lifeguards for this summer.
It was a great idea. And I also want to compliment you on your management of the intense capital improvement projects this year. You've been a very busy guy. And it's wonderful to see you tick off a bunch of things that have been on that capital improvement plan for decades, it seems.
Well, we've always had the largest capital improvements. We have 12, 13 facilities. We generally have 35 items on the capital projects. I think we funded 14 of them this year. They're not all completed. I have to work with the auditor to carry over some things into next year because it's just, typical things with the supply chain, et cetera, getting things done. They're funded, but not everything has been done yet. But we have been moving along pretty well on a number of projects. And yes, we are very busy on that.
So
I'd be remiss if I didn't thank, first of all, the taxpayers for that, because everyone is struggling out there. And whenever we get a project, we don't ask for something that we don't think would benefit the community as a whole. And we know how hard the taxpayers work for their money, and we try to be good stewards of what they give us. And then when the money comes in, it's up to the mayor and the council to decide, where it goes. And we're very appreciative, both of the mayor and the council, for helping us get to some of these projects that have been there. I think the average length of year on the capital projects for the items that were funded this year was 8 years on the capital projects list. So we're knocking some things off, as you said, that have been here for quite a while.
Does anyone have questions for Dennis? Councilor Delizio, then Councilor Bennett.
Thank you. It's more of a comment, Dennis. Again, I appreciate your forethought in when you're sending down some of these. Conversation I had with Dennis at one point early in the year, I'm like, what in the world is pickleball? And now we have since seen that pickleball is the fastest growing sport in this country. So kudos on, and I've gotten a lot of feedback from the residents that, wow, this is great, we're going to have pickleball. So Dennis, kudos again. And it's a funny anecdote right there. It's an accurate anecdote, but I think it's just indicative of, as you said, being responsible and clicking these things off the CIP when you can. So thank you, Dennis.
Thank you. Pickleball is now what tennis was in the 70s.
With better shots, I hope.
Councilor Bennett, you have the floor.
Thank you. Dennis, just a quick follow-up question on the lifeguard course. I think it was a fantastic thing that you offered that for free. I think that put some staffing into the pipeline. Will you be continuing to offer that going forward to prevent turnover or loss due to turnover that naturally happens as people sort of move on from lifeguarding?
I think, and welcome to the council. I don't think I've officially met you yet, so welcome to the council. I did see you one night in the chambers, but didn't get to say hello. Our intent would be to get through the season, see where we stand, and we hope to run it again this year. To be honest with you, it was funded through a private grant last year through the Friends of Attleboro Recreation, and we haven't had an official conversation about that yet, but that in my mind is something that we would like to do and would plan to do.
Thank you.
Thank
Hope
you.
we get to meet in person soon.
There you go.
Does anyone else have anything for Dennis? Councilor Waterman, you have the floor.
Thank you. Welcome back from the old sod in Ireland.
Thank you.
Hope you had a good time. So we mentioned pickleball, and I think that is the rage now. And what is the future intention down at Veterans Field in South Attleboro regarding pickleball? Is that still a possibility?
Well, it is. Right now, we have funding from the council for pickleball at Finberg Field. You appropriated $88,000 to build pickleball courts there. It's actually going to cost a little more than that, so I'm trying to shuffle some money around and see if we can't. We'd have to get council votes to move other money from other projects into that to get it done there. So I think where we lie right now, Council Waterman, is to get the one at Finberg Field done, and then hopefully move on to South Attleboro after that. There's quite an appetite for it within the city. I get more calls for pickleball than anything else that we get calls for here at the Recreation Department.
Thanks.
Anyone else have questions for Dennis? Seeing none, thank you, Dennis, for
Thank you.
being with us tonight. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Have a
Doing
great night.
job. And we'll move on to Forestry, Park, Zoo, Animal Control. Who do we have? Derek. Derek, welcome aboard. Derek, can you hear us okay? We can't hear you. Are you saying anything? No, you're not saying anything, and I can't hear you. Now I see you're muted. And you're unmuted. But I'm not hearing you.
If I may, Councilor Conti, if I can talk some highlights while Derek figures that out, so we don't have some dead air here. He can talk about it much more articulate than I can, but I've had a number of discussions with Derek on this. So he's going to tell you the same thing, that the inflationary pressures on supply budgets are hitting him similar to other departments. And very similar to Dennis and Recreation, the consumables required to maintain the facilities around town are increasing. So we see a $10,000 increase in the supply grounds line, 546010, over the original for fiscal 22. And then we see another $1,000 over in vehicles and supplies equipment for some of the same reasons. Just the cost of buying the same things has gone up. That's in the park piece. I'm sure you can talk about labor a little bit better than I can. On the animal control side, we've added an additional animal control agent, animal control officer. This has been an increase that the animal control has been asking for quite some time, and we were able to fit it into the budget this year with just 2 animal control officers and them somebody having to be ready to answer a call 24 hours a day, with any sort of planned vacations, sick time, absences.
Hello.
Derek, we finally got you.
All right. Yeah.
All right, here we go.
There we go.
So Derek, we're talking about the animal control officer. Would you
Yes.
give us some substance that can convince us this is necessary?
Okay, so currently and previously, we've had 2 animal control officers. And when one of them goes out with some sort of injury or is on vacation, there become stretches of time where, said individual is working for 20, 25 days straight. And it becomes an issue, because if something were to happen to that individual, we're left strapped with nobody to man the position. A lot
So
of
why
times,
does it have to be a full-time position and not a part-time position?
because in order to be an animal control officer, you have to be a fully licensed through the state. So it doesn't make sense to fully license someone who is part-time. The full-time, putting that amount of funding and time into it, it just doesn't make sense.
Do we have any mutual aid with other communities near us on animal control?
We do not, no.
Is it unheard of?
For animal control, it is, only because you can't have 24-hour mutual aid with most animal control setups have at least 3 people in them. So with only 3 people working, their normal shifts, doing mutual aid is almost impossible, especially when we only have 2. That would just add more of an overload to our system as it is.
Derek, every department head has opened up the floor with the pressures that are facing them. And now we've heard from so many departments, we're hearing the same thing from everybody. The inflation pressures, the personnel issues, and the contracts, all going up and
Yes.
putting incredible financial pressure on your department. The inflation, I think we all know what's going on with you. I mean, you're the victim of supply chain economics and inflation. The personnel, I'm going to predict that's the same thing we heard from Owen Bebo, that these are unusual times. This generation is not like the prior generations. They don't work the same. They don't act the same. They don't show up after they've been hired. You run a different operation. You're kind of like Dennis. You're more of a farmer than you are an administrator, because you're taking care of land and property, and it's weather dependent. So is there anything that you want to add about financial pressures on your department?
Well, I think it's more of the same that Dennis was just talking about, where it's the price of supplies have gone up dramatically. The fertilizer, the grass seed, the mulch. I've had 3 different price increases for the past 3 months on our mulch orders because of fuel surcharges. A lot of products that we order through the zoo, they'll only hold their quotes for 10 days. Usually it's 30 days because the price, fluctuates so much. So, it's probably the same with everyone, but that's the biggest challenge right now.
Does anyone have any questions for Derek? Councilor Delicio, you have the floor.
Thank you. Derek, nice job as always. Can you talk a little bit about, in the fiscal 23 objectives, begin plans to renovate the Newell shelter in surrounding areas?
Yes. So the Newell shelter is probably the most popular spot in Capron Park, but in my opinion, it's the worst looking spot in Capron Park, and I'd like to do something to remedy that, whether it be tapping into some of the trust funds that Capron Park has, or looking into some sort of state grant that would assist with renovation, and hopefully do it in a tiered method of renovation, not everything at once, but maybe tackle a few aspects of that area each year until we get it to the point that I would like to see it at. So that's going to be my main objective going forward, is renovating that area and making it, a very desirable place.
And if I could just follow up, what would you say your vision is for the Newell shelter? What would, what are you hoping when you say, it begins part of your focal plan? What's your vision for the use there?
Well, the Newell Shelter, believe it or not, is one of our most rented out facilities in the park. So adding amenities to that facility that would make it more attractive, whether it be, doors so it can be used in the winter, better gardens around it so it's more attractive for people to use, actual bathrooms in and around the facility. Right now, we just have 2 porta-johns, which is not a very desirable thing. So it's adding those type of amenities that would make it more attractive for people to use and, generate more revenue towards the department.
What kind of, when it's rented out, what's it rented out for? Is it, entertainment? Is it weddings, parties, combination of above?
It's a combination of everything. A lot of parties, a lot of, just family get-togethers. We've actually had a lot of people rent it out for meetings because they want the open air with COVID going on. It's very eclectic in its uses, but it seems to be it's a very popular spot for people to utilize.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Derek.
Yep.
Anyone else have questions? Deb Gould, you have the floor.
Derek, I know the council already voted to reauthorize the Zoo Revolving Fund, but it is a pretty big part of your operation and it's not part of the general fund budget. Could you, and for the councilors, I'm sure they all remember, the Zoo was fortunate enough to receive in the most recent 2 fiscal years, the one we're in and the one that closed last year, fiscal 21, some grants from the state that helped support the zoo. But this fund, and could you just talk a little bit about the Zoo Revolving Fund and what you're experiencing there? I know it's still, it has money in it, folks, but it certainly is not to the levels that pre-pandemic. I mean, it's got money, but pre-pandemic, we had substantial funds in there. And right now, unencumbered in the fund is just over $400,000. And obviously you need to get through the salaries and everything for the next month. So excuse me, if you wouldn't mind, I think it's just important for the council and those at home to hear a little bit about the zoo.
Yeah, so the zoo just went through its latest AZA accreditation. We'll know the results of that in September. All signs point to a positive experience that they had. And kind of tapping on to what Deb was saying, our increase in admission fees is definitely going to help starting July 1st. And I believe the restructure in our zoo membership starting January 1st will help with some of the revenue generation in the zoo. We're also hoping to add some new exhibits and new type of events that would attract people to the zoo in the coming year, such as last year we had the Brick Live, which was the Lego statues. That was a big generator of people coming to the zoo. So we hope to add more of those type of events and tapping into some of these state grants to help fund those type of events.
And the wedding seemed to go well.
Yeah, the wedding went well. We're going to try. We already have people interested in weddings and just kind of workplace events being hosted at the zoo. So I believe that type of feature at the zoo is going to be attractive in the next couple of years, and especially if we're able to, eventually build some sort of pavilion within the zoo that can host these things and make it easier for someone trying to, rent a spot for a wedding. It'll make the zoo a much more attractive place to hold these type of events.
Got it. Anyone else have questions for Derek? Jeremy, you have the floor.
I will be brief. I just want to wrap up a point on the additional animal control officer. We previously had a part-time kennel keeper who was able to cover in these absences that either planned or unplanned. But with the licensure changes that Derek had talked about, we know, we can't have a kennel keeper do that. We have to have a fully fledged licensed animal control officer. And he got into the reasons why it's difficult to hire or near impossible to hire a part-time person with that licensure. And then the only other point on mutual aid is it's mutual. So when we only have 2 people, if we're to get into an agreement and we only have 2 people, it would be difficult for us to, respond when called to from surrounding communities. So that's another reason I think it hasn't been explored seriously from our end. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Deborah Gould, you have the floor.
Just because I know it was particularly important to you at one time, Councilor Conti, I wanted you to know that the Animal Shelter Building Fund also has money in it, $76,000. It's a revolving fund that was renewed in the most recent council vote. But for those of you that are newer to the council, this is the fund that was established so that in the future, if there were capital needs related to the animal shelter when it was built, there was some money that the late fees for dog licenses, I believe, goes into this fund. And we have tapped into it, I think once, Derek, a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
It's
we had to
generally
tap
not
into-
used, it's for capital expenses, but there's some money in there so that if there's something that goes wrong with the building, there's an opportunity for that department to use this fund for a capital improvement.
I
Yeah,
remember that it was a leak in the roof that we had to fix.
It was water heater went, and I believe
Oh.
that's what we tapped into it for.
So $36,000 sounds like a lot of money, but that generator sitting outside has an expected life of, I think, 15 years, and is already like 5 years old. Or how old is the? It seems like we just built the animal shelter.
It does, but at $25 per late fee, there's $76,000 in there right now.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
it was something that the council said, you know what, we need to at least put some money aside for in the future. And, you know, I mean, I just thought it was something that you guys did that was really a good thing. So I thought I would mention it, that there's
Well, thank you.
$76,000 in there right now.
Thank you.
And-
Since it was my idea, I take the compliment. Thank you.
There you go.
Anything else, Derek, you want to share with the counselors?
No, I think that pretty much sums it up. Anyone
Good.
have any
Keep up the good
questions? for
work.
me?
You're doing great. I
Sorry
think-
about the technical problems.
It's
New
all right.
computer.
Hey, listen, you just run the chipper, okay? Don't worry about the computer.
Yeah. If it has gasoline, I'm all set. All this stuff, you know.
Thank you, Derek. Have a good
All right.
evening.
Thanks, you too. Bye.
We're gonna move on to the assessor. If we could bring Julie, if we could promote Julie into our room. I see Julie's here. I see she's muted. Julie, welcome.
Hello, thank you.
Julie, every department is opening up, talking about what financial pressures they're facing in the coming year. Your department's a little bit different. You don't use supplies. We count in your department for income. And it's really, I know, hard to forecast what your growth is going to be. And I know you're being conservative at $800,000. But there's two things I'd like to ask you this year. I'd like to ask you to put some special emphasis on the outside vendors that are in charge of finding that growth, to just give an extra emphasis that we are really looking for all the growth. Now, if there's a way that we can alter what we're doing, you know, to bring more inspections, or perhaps move things around so that we might be able to cover personal property, for example, more carefully than we have in the past. I'd appreciate any effort that you could do that over the course of the year.
So to just speak to that briefly, we are, for the first year in many years, switching our reval company vendor. So we were with Northeast Revaluation Group for many years. This year, the board decided to use Vision, which also happens to be our CAMA system vendor. So looking forward to starting a new relationship with them, and absolutely going to make sure we go into it gung ho. I am confident that we receive every building permit that comes into the building department. Looking forward to, hopefully through the full circle upgrade, being able to directly import building permits from the building department into our CAMA system. That would definitely make sure we're not missing anything. But yes, it is going to be emphasized. It is hard to predict when you don't have the utility forms of list in yet. We're going through those. I think we are going to see a good amount of growth from the utility companies this year. So I know we had a little over $1 million the last 2 years. I'm hoping that's where we're going to come in at again. But we're definitely going to make sure this new company is out there doing their due diligence and getting everything they can.
So beyond that, in your budget message, you're saying that Near Map is up and running, and that's producing additional levy dollars.
Yes, Near Map, that is for the first time that's included in my budget. It was the first year funded through the CARES Act. Last year I asked for an appropriation for it. So this year it is in the assessor's budget. I have been able to track, I've set up a few codes in the system to be able to start tracking. What I have been able to track so far, just so far this year, is that I have $10,000 in new growth revenue that we've picked up with Near Map. I've also been able to use it in conjunction with the sales verifications that we send out. I use those Near Map, the MLS, and I'm able to log in cyclical inspections. So to just give you an idea, I've been able to do about 40 a month using that average and using the industry standard of about $30 per cyclical inspection, which is what we paid just about that last year. That's about $14,000 in savings if we had to contract out for the cyclical inspections. So it is definitely paying for itself. And other departments also have the use of it.
How many users do you have on Near Map?
I believe we have 10 users on Near Map right now.
It'll grow. It's a wonderful shared service.
Yes.
Does anyone have questions for the assessor? She gets grilled regularly by me. Go ahead, Councilor Cobus.
Thank you, and welcome, Julie. It's great to see you. So first of all, congratulations on I think it was your first reevaluation last year.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes. Is there anything that can be said? How did that go? And was there an overall impact to the budget, or what were the results of that reevaluation in potential budget impacts?
So,
or I guess it's no budget impact.
No,
But
they did do a full canvas. They did a full canvas of personal property also. So we did see some additional increases in the revenue. And of course, with what's going on with property values and the sales right now, definitely seeing a big increase in the values. So as far as the budget, I mean, I think that was indicated by the tax rate actually going down last year. As values go up, tax rate goes down. So.
okay. So the bottom line is, as a result of the reevaluation, people's taxes didn't necessarily go up, even if their house was assessed at being worth more, correct?
So, right, depending how much change was indicated by the sales to your property value. If the tax rate went down, your particular home didn't increase so much in value, your tax bill could have stayed the same, could have gone down, because there is a difference, if you were in a brand new colonial, or if you're in, an older Cape, they weren't adjusted, at the same rate based on the sales analysis.
Okay. And how often do we do the full reevaluations? When's the next one?
It's a 5-year schedule now.
Okay.
So we'll be 2027.
And overall, were there any trends that you saw as part of that? Did condos go up more than single family houses, or multifamily houses go up? Were there any sort of big shifts as opposed to a general across the board rise?
So the bigger shifts were in multifamilies. We definitely saw a large increase in those. I would say condos this year, just based on what I'm seeing so far this year in the sales, they're going up a lot. But based on last year's revaluation, Yeah, it was the multifamilies that really went up the most.
Perfect. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else have questions for the assessor? Okay, thank you, Julie. We'll talk soon.
Thank you all. I'm sure we will. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
And if we could bring in the fire chief. This could take a while. Chief LaChance, I can see you're here. I can see you muted. And I see Assistant Chief John. You're both welcome.
Be unmuted now?
Yeah, I can hear you fine, Chief. Thank
Right.
you. And now it looks like your assistant has come online and we've got the video. Very good.
Yep.
So, Chief,
I'm not. Oh, yeah. Hang on. Let me put the video on too.
very good. So, Chief,
Yes, sir.
we've started our budget discussions by asking each department head, what are the major factors that are affecting the financial environment of the department, and we're hearing the same things. And you and the police chief have a lot of things in common. But we're hearing that inflation is certainly hitting your fuel line. It's hitting your supplies. You've got a supply shortage chain that's affecting the deliveries of things that you need to keep doing what you do. You've got personnel issues that are huge, and you've got large contracts that the contractors are putting in escalation clauses. So you're being hit by three fronts. What I'd like to focus on is the personnel issue that, you and I have had several conversations going back about paramedics, many conversations. I'm looking at the email chain now, and goes all the way back to April 15th. The financial question is that if we can't hire and retain paramedics, can we stay in the rescue business?
So, not to cry wolf, but I've been saying this to the council now for the last several years. First of all, the city cannot afford to not run an ambulance service. We have to run it because we generate over $3.2 million, of which over $2 million goes back into the city's general fund. So losing an ambulance service would decimate the fire department. We'd have 2 fire stations closed permanently. And on top of that, to make up the lost revenue, the city would be facing layoffs in other departments other than the fire department, which would probably have to come from police and school because they're the next biggest too. So that's not an option from a financial standpoint. Certainly it's not an option from a public safety standpoint. The rescue, private ambulance services, while they serve a purpose, they don't provide the same degree of quality care that a municipal service does provide. Something I've said to the past for this, to the council, is that when I first became the fire chief, we were still, this was July 1st of 2010, we were kind of operating in the dark ages for the way we provided EMS. We went from being, without a doubt, probably the worst EMS provider, fire-based in the area, to the best. The risk that we have now is that if we keep doing the same thing that we're doing right now, that's not going to last much longer. In the 12 years, that I've been fire chief, I have hired 77 firefighters. Of those 77, since I've been chief, 54 have been paramedics. From 2004 to 2017, we hired 55, and 50 of them were paramedics. In the last 4 years, we've only been able to hire 4 paramedics out of 38 hires. So that's the struggle we're running into. And when we present our budgets, every budget that I present to the council is kind of a shot in the dark of what's really going to happen, because the budget is built on the assumption that the vacancies that we have, and we always have vacancies at the beginning of the year because I'm always having people resign. So when we assume those vacancies are going to be filled with paramedics. So everything's built on that. The stipends, the salary tables, everything is based on that. And then when we try to hire, like right now, we're trying to hire again. We're trying to hire 6 brand new paramedic list from civil service. We asked for 6 candidates. We got 0. So we're now going down to EMTs. So my budget that you'll have in front of you was based on the assumption that we were going to get paramedics. Now that they're EMTs, I'm going to need another $50,000 a year for those 6 candidates, if we get them, to send them to paramedic school and cover their salaries. So this is not a sustainable plan. We definitely have to do something soon. I have enough paramedics to maintain an ambulance service at this rate for 7 years. You know, if I don't lose a lot more people, could be as low as 3 or 4 if we don't make some changes. And it'll happen quickly because it takes us 6 months to put people on. So, you know, this is something that I've had a conversation with several of you that I think the city really, really needs to figure out a strategy going forward of recruiting and keeping people that want to stay with the city. Because right now we're hiring them, we send them to paramedic school. After they're all done with that, they are now recruited from other cities. Mansfield's a perfect example. Mansfield, they've left civil service. They were already paying more than most of the surrounding departments. They increased the pay, they got out of civil service, and now they increased their pool of candidates so they can actually recruit qualified people from other fire departments. We also send them to the fire academy. Although we don't pay the tuition, I have to pay their salary for 10 weeks when they go to the fire academy. So we're spending 10 weeks of salary at the fire academy, a year of salary at paramedic school, and, you know, thousands of dollars on equipment and protective equipment. And then when they're done, after they've been working for a couple of years and they've get cards from other departments and they realize the difference they can make, and it's pretty substantial for some of the departments. Not all, you know, there are departments that pay less than us, but they're having the same problems. So it's, you know, I would urge people to take that very seriously, because it's only a matter of time that we cross the line that I can't keep making people work 100 hours a week.
So we can't count on civil service, the civil service hiring going away soon, because that is a state issue. That is a very political issue. It is it's an elephant we can't move. And I know that, you know, we're not administration. We're the municipal council. We're not supposed to meddle in administration. But this is a finance issue, and this is a finance meeting, and this finance issue has to be resolved. And I've asked Owen to look into it, and I want to know, have you had conversations with Owen in the last month?
Yeah, I've had conversations with him as well as the mayor for probably, you know, a year on and off. The problem, like you said, is that it's a political football. It's much more complicated than people realize, because you know, unions are going to be heavily, generally speaking, they're going to be opposed to it. Not all unions are, but generally speaking, they'll be opposed to it unless there's a benefit for them. It's just, unfortunately, it's a fact of life with bargaining. That's the way that it works. You know, my position is that getting out of civil service would only increase our pool. It still doesn't doesn't fix the underlying issue, is that we still wouldn't attract candidates, because if they're not civil service, they have more options to look at. So we've lost several people in our department to non-civil service departments. You know, Mansfield's a perfect example now. So Mansfield used to be civil service. Now they can actually just, you know, put something in the newspaper, say we're hiring paramedics. If you're firefighter 1 and 2 certified already, give us a call. And they're doing that from all of the departments, because Mansfield contract is much more lucrative. And, you know, I mean, it's economics, it's supply and demand. And what the challenge is now is there's a shortage of paramedics statewide. In fact, it's nationwide, but statewide is worse, because in Massachusetts, the paramedic program is now affiliated with colleges. Several years ago, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, that wasn't a requirement. So now the paramedic program, they have to have college classes. It's a longer program, it's more expensive, and they can't produce the number of paramedics that they used to, because it has to be run through a college. There's really no private paramedic programs anymore.
Councilor Blaze, you had your hand up. I'm giving you the floor.
Hi, Chief. How are you?
I am well. How are you?
Bottom line, Chief, you're saying that if we didn't have civil service, it'd be easier for you to hire? and we could attract paramedics easier?
I don't know that we would attract them easier because at the bottom line, they'd still look at the things that they're looking at anyway. So they would be looking at contracts online and they would
So
look
what's
at
the answer? More money?
The answer is both. The answer is actually both.
More money and not have civil service.
Right. That would be the best solution. And honestly, the difference in the money is probably not as much as most people would think in terms of the hit to the budget, because I have something here in front of me. This goes back to 2018. So the money that the department and the city has spent since 2018 for, instead of getting paramedics, hiring EMTs, the money that we've spent training them, backfilling them when they're in school, $1.1 million. And out of that number, probably 10 to 12 of them left. And the truth is, if we're going to continue to provide paramedics, that number is going to get worse because we're trying to hire 6 more right now and I can't get paramedics. So I'm going to hire 6 more EMTs. We just hired 14 EMTs or first responders. So that's 20 employees I have now that we've just hired in the last year. They're not paramedics. To send them to paramedic school, that's $1 million.
And there's no guarantee once they go to school and they get their paramedic standard, that we're going to hold them?
Correct.
Well, I don't want to shame on us for not having something written in there that if we spend money on them and we send them to school and they get certified, that they're not some way liable for that finance or that money we put into them. Shame on us.
Yeah,
I'd like to, if I could interrupt you just for a moment. Yeah.
Shame on us as a city.
Yep, no, I understand.
So for the rest of the councilors that may not know, that the city has instituted an ordinance that, other than the union, if you are a city employee and you would benefit in your position through getting an advanced degree, the city would compensate you for getting that degree. But upon graduation or getting that degree, you had a term of 5 years to stay with the city. And if you left during that term, a declining portion each year would have to be repaid to the city as compensation for the education package. It was at the time thought by counselors that a 5-year period was reasonable because once you learn something in college, by 5 years, what you've learned is useless unless you're going through continuing education. So that's the way it is for everybody else except the unions. And of course and Peter's correct. Peter's saying that, we don't have that in our union contracts, and they're probably not in any union contracts.
I don't, if I may, Richard.
Yes, you have the floor, sir.
I don't think that would affect any of the firemen we have or paramedics we have now. If we got harsh on what we hire, what we school, that there's a penalty for leaving, that they have to pay it back. Because it's a big, how many people have you had leave in the last, say, 5 years?
It's at least a dozen.
And the reason for leaving?
It's
money.
Salary.
Money.
So I'd be cautious because we already can't attract candidates. I don't know that putting more restrictions on the pool that doesn't want to work in Attleboro is going to get us more candidates. We're trying to hire EMTs and I can't even get that many. So it's, the reality of it is they're looking at the contracts like any other profession in the world would do. I would do it. Any one of you would do it. If you could do the same job and make 20% more for the same number of hours, you're going to do it.
I understand that. It's society today and how much it costs to bring up your family, educate them, pay your taxes and whatnot. Money is probably the number one item they look for. I know the police department's having a heck of a job. People are leaving. And for instance, we don't have the Quinn bill in the police department.
Right.
We just had a girl leave, go to Walpole, 25% raise. You got to start, pay peanuts, you get monkeys. I'm afraid we're going to have to start paying more.
You know, I look at it from a more pragmatic point, though, that
Keep them.
the 16 or the 20 that we just hired, if I send them to paramedic school, I'm going to need $300,000 for the tuition. I'm going to need $450,000 to backfill when they're away, and then I'm going to need another $75,000 because they get a $5,000 bonus when they finish paramedic school. So we're going to spend all of that money instead of figuring out an option to get them as paramedics in the first place.
If they leave, you got to do it all over again, right, Chief?
Yeah.
Right, and that's what's happening is that we're spending this money, and then next year I actually have several of the employees that we hired. Well, it usually takes a 2-year cycle because they have to go through paramedic school and a fire academy, and then when they're done with that, and I've got a handful right now that are actively looking that are more than likely going to be gone.
Yeah. Sad out there, Chief.
It is
I'm
sad.
sorry you're in that position. A lot of pressure on you.
So Peter, you've made your point that maybe they need to make more money, but I'd like to make the point that means we have to have more income because we have to have the money to be able to pay them. And so, when we reorganized the fire department, because we could see that with the new reorganization and the new ambulance fees that we were instituting, that it would not be a overwhelming tax to the city budget. Something similar to that has to be thought about how we solve this paramedic problem. We have to figure out where the income is going to come from to be able to pay the higher salaries. And I think that is probably what Deb Gould wants to talk about. I see your hand is up, and Deb Gould, you got the floor.
Thank you. I just need clarification for something because I'm either misunderstood something or I'm missing something. You said you called for 6 paramedics and you got 0. Is that because nobody was interested in signing the list, or there weren't any paramedics available on civil service to put on the list?
No, it was a brand new list, so there were 350 plus paramedic candidates on the list. 5 or 6 of them signed the list for Attleboro, but that's common. Is when anybody gets a card in the mail, they sign because they don't want to miss their chance to get a job. But then what happens is a bunch of other communities of the civil service also sent out those cards to the same candidates. So the candidates take the information they have and they look at all of the different towns, they look at their contracts, and then they rule us out.
All right. The reason I was asking, Chief, is there is a pool of available paramedics that you're saying potentially would come to Attleboro if our compensation package was equal to or greater than some other communities that are actively recruiting. And because those folks who are looking may look at the list and stuff and say, we're not interested in signing in Attleboro. You're hiring EMTs. We're paying for their training, and then they're going elsewhere because there's nothing that requires a retention period here in Attleboro.
Correct.
I'm just curious, while they're here in their training, going to whatever education programs you're setting them, is it all just liability to the city, or are you getting any benefit? Are they going to fires? Are they doing anything where during that time frame I hate to say like they're benefiting the city at least during that time frame, or?
Nope, that's a fair question. We don't allow them to do anything firefighting until they've either finished the Mass Fire Academy, because that would be a significant liability, or we do our own in-house. We do a 3-week training program at the city of Fall River, which is an additional expense that we have to do to have these people trained to a minimum standard that we can use them as firefighters. As far as on ambulances, if they're an EMT, they can work on the ambulance with a paramedic, but it's already kind of a reduction in service. Plus they're inexperienced, so we kind of have to manage how we actually do that. But when they're in paramedic school, they're probably gone close to 50% of the time. So we're backfilling with overtime typically to fill them.
Thank you.
Chief, can you restate the number of firefighters you've hired between 2004 and 2017?
Yep. So from 2004 to now is 77.
And what was it between 2004 and 2017?
I can tell you from 2018 to 2004, and then you can do the subtraction. How's that? Is that fair? From 2018 until now, we hired 38 and 4 of them were paramedics. I'm sorry, from 2018 to now, 38 hires and only 4 were paramedics.
Got it.
And to put it into perspective, before that, you know, I'm looking at a list from 2004 to 2016, and 36 hires in a row were paramedics.
Yep. Wow.
So, I mean, you know, there's a lot of things that could be debated, but the reality of it is that speaks for itself. We cannot get them. And, you know, it can't be overstated that quality paramedics save lives every day. You know, I'm still a paramedic, but by no means does anybody want me to take care of a family member. What the firefighters, especially the paramedics, are doing every day is unbelievable. To say they save lives every day is not actually an exaggeration. And I mean, we've been recognized by Sturdy, by our medical director, for the performance of the EMS personnel in the department. Through no fault of their own, if we don't have that same number of paramedics, that's going to change drastically. We had a woman that actually came to the station probably a month ago that she went into cardiac arrest. I forget what district it was. The fire engine got there. So we also typically will have a paramedic on the fire engine. When a lot of my offices are paramedics, most of the fire engines have the ALS drugs on them. They have defibrillators. They actually started treating the woman. They defibrillated her a couple of times. The ambulance showed up with additional paramedics on scene. They got her heart rate back. And by the time she got to the hospital, she was talking. And like 3 days later, she was discharged with 0 neurological deficits. And that doesn't happen without the right staff. That doesn't happen if you chose to go with, say, private ambulance service that puts 2 ambulances in the city and they're also doing transfers. Those responses go from 4 minutes to 6 minutes to 10 to 12, and then people die. So the ambulance service the timing is critical to have the resources deployed. 4 to 6 minutes is kind of the golden time to get ALS on scene. And we're very fortunate we can still do it. And, you know, I don't want to put the fear that we can't do it tomorrow. We can, but in 2 years from now, if I'm coming to the council and I'm saying the last 60 people we hired of the EMTs, we're going to have major problems.
Well, what got me was you stated that $2 million from ambulance fees are transferred into the general fund on an annual basis. I know Taunton has a private ambulance and I don't know what they're paying for it. But I'm guessing that a contract for a private ambulance company for the city the size of Attleboro would be tremendous.
Yeah, actually, Taunton receives money. It's probably $100,000 a year that the ambulance service gives them. The reason the ambulance service gives money is because they're making boatloads of money providing the service.
Right.
And that's the point. We make boatloads of money. I mean, the best option to protect the EMS service long-term, there's a risk associated with it in terms of fire protection, because the extra paramedics and the EMTs also function in dual capacity as firefighters, which is why we still have 4 fire stations open. But we should protect the EMS service with the revolving account, and we should really be looking at an enterprise fund, because there is absolutely no justification for the city to ever even consider not having ALS when we definitely generate enough money to probably provide it. It might have to be modified a little bit, but I firmly believe that we could actually do it that way.
Interesting.
The downside is the missed revenue has to be made up someplace else on the city side.
Yeah, $2 million. That's a chunk. Councilor Kobus, you have the floor.
Outstanding. Thank you. And just to add to what you were saying, Chief LaChance, if we were to restructure things in that way, I would be very supportive of that in general. So I think people have covered most of my concerns. I wanted to talk about the paramedic issue, and I think you've covered that. The one thing I didn't hear is that I was questioning is, over the last year, how many paramedics did we lose to other communities? And like not folks retiring, but lost to another community. Do we have that number for the last year?
I had in FY22, I had 7 quit. 7 resigned to go to another community.
7 in just the last year.
Yep.
Okay. All right. And then I was looking at you talked about the accomplishments for fiscal year 22. The staffing was restored to 2017 levels. And so staffing's back up. Obviously missing paramedics, obviously, but and then looking at this year's budget for overtime salaries, with the staffing being restored to previous levels, my expectation is that overtime would be reduced, and it has been. In 21, it was almost $1 million. Last year, it was $706,000. This year, the recommended amount is dropped down to $500,000. But based on these conversations that we've been having, and I saw that the requested amount was initially $700,000. Are you comfortable with that $500,000 number for overtime based on?
Comfortable is always a tough word because it's hard to predict injuries and other things. But the thing to keep in mind is that as soon as I lose one firefighter that's not planned, so it's not in my budget, I'm going to save $60,000 or so, give or take a little bit, in salaries. But I'm going to have to immediately transfer $90,000 from salaries to overtime. So every time we do that, I'm inflating the overtime account by stealing money from the salaries account, but it's a hole. So that's why you see the numbers. You know, the $685,000 in overtime would have been several $100,000 less if we would have been able to hire at the beginning of last fiscal year, if we were able to get everybody, and they were paramedics. That's the other part that, you know, I plan on them being paramedics, but if they're EMTs, I have to send them to paramedic school, and depending on when we send them, because we can't always send them the fiscal year that we hire them, we have to get them to the fire academy, and then we have to have openings. So we're kind of planning, doing the best we can, but then when you finally get them on payroll and you try to get them in paramedic school, you're being told, well, I can't do it till next year. So as an example, next year, we're going to be sending 14 or 15 to the fire academy. When we built this budget, when I submitted it, it was assuming we were going to send 7 or 6. But since I've had those 6 resignations, the next 6 we hire, I'm going to have to send to the fire academy. None of those numbers are in the budget because the budget assumed we were going to have them all on July 1st. So it's kind of a work of art the way that it works. It's a challenge now because when I first got on, there wasn't so much turnover. The department was older. We also have, we've had a lot of retirements because of age. The number of retirements is going to eventually settle down, but we have a significant number of retirements coming up in the next 5 to 10 years. The next 5 years, we probably have 15 or 20 retirements. So those will be other holes, and it's hard to predict because they don't have to tell me when they're retiring. So they can go do it without my notice, without me having any idea that they're doing it. Unless they're going to be turning 65, I can't prove that they're going to retire. So we kind of have to hope that that works out in our favor when they actually do.
Okay. So the bottom line is, I hear that the 500,000 is probably going to be low, a low estimate for overtime for this year.
It more than likely will. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. I don't know if there's anything Jeremy or Deb would. I mean, we can't suggest on the council. It's not our purview to suggest to increase that amount, but I don't know
specifically
if there's
cannot increase the budget.
Right.
You're right.
Yeah, exactly.
No, something, Todd, something that we used to be able to do out of the revolving account is we used to be able to use the revolving account funds as a cushion for overtime, so that when people hired on overtime on the ambulance, I would be able to pay that from the revolving account. It's not that I can't do it now, I still can, but there's other expenses in the revolving account that have been moved from the general fund that make that less likely. And then on top of that, if I'm sending them all to paramedic school, the revolving account can't afford that. So if I have to send 14 firefighters to paramedic school, and I'm going to need to come up with $300,000 for tuition, even if the city was going to come up with the money for that, I still have to pay the overtime to backfill them to go, and that's another several $100,000. So the overtime could be managed a lot more easily if we had paramedics, because the revolving account could help offset it.
Okay, thank you.
Deb Gould, you have the floor.
I'll let Jeremy speak to some of the specifics, but Councilor Cobus, in the budget message, the council would have the opportunity to at least say what their concern is, and whether it be for paramedics or, you know, for the administration to look at something in particular, or overtime, or whatever the case may be. Because I know, Chief, you hired, there was a plan and you guys hired additional firefighters to try to alleviate overtime, right? Now, with the folks leaving, is that really not?
No. So we hired 14 extra in FY22. That was the plan. I had 7 retirements, 4 of which were not expected, and 7 resignations. So that means
So you had a net loss.
That took care of all that. You know?
Yeah. Okay.
And that's my concern, is that the 6 that we're hiring, we're going to have the same problem in FY23, and we'll have the same problem in FY24. And it's pretty hard to predict who's going to go and, you know, when it's going to happen. But I think that it would be wise to look at some options to improve it. And something that Peter had said about employees signing something to stay. I don't think that's a bad idea, but that has to be collectively bargained. And it's already been done in some communities. And what they found is that it's pretty hard to get back the money after somebody leaves. So it's not as effective. I personally had thought of other ideas. Like I think a tiered incentive system that you know, the first year that they finish school, they pick a dollar amount. The second year it goes up. The third year it goes up. The fourth year it goes up. So that by the time they've had 4 or 5 years in the system, I don't lose very many employees that have been here for more than 5 years. Once they get to top step or close to top step, very few leave. The ones that tend to leave have been here for a couple of years because they don't have a lot invested into the city. And when they're looking at the salary structure, and they can go to another community and work less because they're not as busy. That's a generational thing. That they can go there and work less and make 15% more money, they're going to go do that.
Right. But so the plan to hire additional firefighters to help some relief on the overtime budget, basically you hired 14, 7 of them went someplace else. You had the unexpected retirement. So you're almost, I think you said you had 4 in there. So you're at like a net gain of 3, or were you at a net loss? And now you're hiring 6 more. But if you have 6 retirements, you're not gaining. You're not even gaining on the firefighter side. So you have a paramedic problem and the firefighter staffing problem. So it's going to get worse if those 2 different buckets of hires aren't, you know, bolstered in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
Okay. I just want to make sure that I understand it's actually 2 problems, not just one.
And just for clarity, where it says restore staffing to fiscal 2017 levels, is that accurate or no?
On paper, the funding was in place to hire, to have that level. So certainly when this was all in writing and submitted, that was the expectation. But since that time, you know, we've lost almost 2/3 of the people who were at it. So we're not at those levels now. We will be back at them with the 6 that we plan to hire. But again, it's a little bit deceiving because we're going to hire 6. They're going to have to go to the fire academy, and they're going to have to probably go to paramedic school sometimes. So it really doesn't solve the staffing problem, even if we could get them July 1st, because I really can't use them for 6 months.
And what is your target date, a realistic target date, but actually hire in the door? Because I know the process, it takes a while.
I would say September.
Okay. So it's even 3 months out.
Yep.
Okay.
Councilor Delissio, you have the floor.
Thank you, Rick. Chief, always good to see you. Thank you for this. This is always an edification. Assistant Chief Gannett, good to see you as well. So what I'm struggling with right now, there's several things, but what I'm struggling with right now is we're just talking dollars and cents for a department where seconds matter, and you're literally dealing with the outcome of people's lives. We talked about 15 firefighters per shift. Chief, in your opinion, is that the bare minimum, or in a perfect world would have 17, 18 per shift?
Yeah, we also have offices, so the number can be a little bit misleading. With the offices on shift, we're usually around 19 to 20.
Yeah.
Which, you know, a good way of looking at it is you can either look at NFPA standards, There's also something called an ISO rating, where an independent agency evaluates the way that the fire department is deployed with their staffing model. And our ISO rating, when I became chief, was a 5. It's a scale of 0 to 10. 10 is the worst. I'm sorry, scale of 1 to 10, and we've gone up to a 2. And a lot of that was when we looked at the data. That's based on, they look at how quickly you can get, the number they like to see is 15 firefighters at a structure fire within 4 to 6 minutes. That's kind of the standard, because to do everything effectively with all the assignments that the firefighters get, without getting into the details about how they actually do their job,
Sure.
that's what the experts say. And it makes a big difference. If you've seen in the news recently in Attleboro, we've had more fires in the last 6 months than we've had in years.
Yeah.
But they're usually relatively small and kept under control. And the reason is that obviously it's the skills and the training of the firefighters, but a big part of it is the staffing level. So when they get to a fire, the first companies can go in and they know that there's another truck coming that's going to get them a water supply, and it's safe for them to go in. And they know that the ladder truck is coming, that they're going to be able to do their job and put ladders to the building in case the firefighters have to go out. You go in other communities that are operating on a much lower level, that maybe only have 5 or 6 firefighters on duty a day. When they go to a fire, it's totally different. They go there and they kind of have to wing it and hope for the best. And it's not their fault, but that's why you see a lot of those other towns have buildings burning right to the ground. They're total losses that wouldn't necessarily happen if they had more staffing.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think, we have seen that there's more, and I'd be remiss, first of all, if I didn't thank you and the entire fire department for everything that happened during COVID. I mean, talk about the front line. You and your department were literally the front line. When we talk about paramedics versus EMTs, I struggled for my first couple of years on council understanding the difference between an EMT and a paramedic. And if I understand it, an EMT is essentially basic to intermediate, where a paramedic can administer the advanced life support, which just illustrates the importance.
Yeah, so if you even would ask any cardiologist, most cardiologists would even say that a highly trained paramedic, because they're not all paramedics are created equal. It's just like any other profession. Some are far more skilled than others, but we have a great group of highly skilled paramedics. They would actually tell you that when you have a heart attack or you're in a cardiac arrest, the best care you get is the first 6 to 8 minutes that you get in the pre-hospital setting from paramedics. They're better at that than the emergency room. That's not to take anything away from the emergency room, but this is exactly why advanced life support and paramedics were thought up, why it became into existence, because American Red Cross, American Heart Association, a lot of physicians realized that the people that were dying in the hospitals from heart attacks, especially heart attacks and strokes, especially, wouldn't die if that care was being provided in the house. And actually, since I've been chief, one of the things that changed was when I was a paramedic, the operating procedures where we'd go to your house, we'd put you in the ambulance as quickly as we could, we'd start treating you while driving to the hospital. We're not allowed to do that anymore, because they've actually determined that time you waste getting them out of the house could be the difference between life and death. So now the protocols are very clear that we have to treat in the house first. So they have to bring all of the equipment in. They start doing everything in the house, get them stabilized as quickly as they can, and then get them in the ambulance. If they did it any other way, they'd have serious ramifications from the Department of Public Health. So they look at it as what we can do to save lives. And the truth is that that the system we have is very effective, and it's saving lives every day.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you. I've got a few questions. The other one would be, how common is it to have more than one call happening simultaneously?
It happens several times every day. So, we do 8,500 calls a year. We probably do 6,000 or 6,500 medical calls. There is an interesting phenomenon that they kind of used to refer to it as clustering. It defies logic that there could be a period of time for like 2 or 3 hours where there's virtually no calls, and then all of a sudden in a period of an hour you have 6 or 7 calls. Mm-hmm. So it is a common phenomenon. Even when we were operating 4 ambulances, it was not uncommon to see all 4 at the hospital at the same time. We routinely have 3 ambulances at Sturdy at the same time.
So that puts even more of a strain on the workforce, I would presume.
Yes, it does. Absolutely does. We're fortunate that the hospital is local and that we can clear quickly. But the other thing that's different now is because of the nature of the care they're providing, they also go to other hospitals more frequently. So we'll go to a cardiac cath lab directly. They'll go right to Miriam Hospital. They'll go right to Rhode Island Hospital. We can even transfer it to Mass General if it's appropriate. So the days of just going to Sturdy and being done with it is definitely not the case anymore.
So you're certainly doing more with less in an environment where seconds count, which says to me, and I don't know, this is more of a rhetorical, but I would like to see a world where the fees generated by the ambulance account stays with the fire department. And, you know, a question I had, Chief, and you answered it, is if you had your magic wand, I think you answered it with the enterprise. I think that's
yeah, and I'm sure Deb will say something about it, because I also understand the dangers associated with that. You know, the difference with the revolving account, and I'm not an expert on enterprise accounts, but I do know that the revolving account, I can't spend it faster than it comes in. Deb won't let me. But I do with the general fund, it's a little bit different.
Sure.
But I still think that it can be managed. You know, Fall River, their EMS system is an enterprise system, so there are several that do it. That doesn't mean that there'd never be a need at some point for the city to intervene. That's just a fact of life. It could happen, but I do think that it's an option that's worth looking at, because that's a service that you really don't want to see go.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And I agree totally. So my next question is really probably for Jeremy. Jeremy, a couple weeks ago when we talked, I mentioned hazard pay. We talked about premium pay. Hazard pay, if I'm incorrect, and Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, but it is contractual, but isn't that more of used for uniforms and purchasing uniforms, or that hazard pay?
So previous to this collective bargaining agreement, there was a hazard duty stipend for the fire department. The chief can give a better history on that. I believe at one point it was uniform money. I don't quite know the genesis, so he can chime in there. But in this last MOU, the hazardous duty stipend, which was previously a flat stipend for a number of agreements, was rolled into the base salary for the firefighters, half 1 year, half the next year. So if you see the hazardous duty stipend line, which is the last salary line in the fire budget, you can see in 2021 it was cut halfway into 2022, and then cut entirely in 2023 because it's now part of the base and subject to the annual COLAs.
Sure. So my follow-up question to that then, Jeremy, is when I did bring up premium pay, you were pretty adamant, pretty confident that and felt you didn't want to entertain a conversation about hazard pay. Premium pay. We're talking about how we're trying to keep firefighters, how we're trying to be able to incentivize the firefighters. Can I just ask, what is the downside of even entertaining a conversation as it relates to premium pay, especially as we are seeing other local communities that are offering premium pay?
The local communities that I've talked to regarding premium pay are in a similar stance that I am. And by premium pay, you mean the up to $13 per hour starting on March 3rd, 2021, up through December 31st, 2023, and as funded by the American Rescue Plan Act.
Correct.
We're talking about the same thing, right?
Yeah, we're talking about money from ARPA.
Yeah, okay. Just want to make sure. We use similar language for very disparate things sometimes, so I want to make sure we're on the same page. So a number of the communities that I've talked to didn't want to open that up. If there are communities that are doing it, I'd be happy to speak with them. I'm not aware of any immediately, but I haven't been on the lookout for them per se. Our concern as an administration was the extremely wide net that applies to. It applies to private sector workers. It applies to folks who work in Attleboro. It applies to public sector and the equity issues around everyone who is impacted by COVID and worked through COVID, fire department chief among them, that we go through that pot of money, that $9 million pretty quickly. So I'm open to having a conversation again with the administration and bringing the chiefs in to talk about it. But we've committed internally our ARPA money to largely infrastructure projects, critical water and wastewater infrastructure projects. Not to say that one thing's more important than the other, right? The city also can't function without water or wastewater. I'm open to a conversation, but we're pretty much capped with our current priorities.
No, and I understand that. And I don't think this is a forum that is appropriate to get into a back and forth. But I do think that, I think we need to look at really what the guidance is and see how we can take care of those who took care of the entire community throughout COVID. And I think that it's a pretty broad statement to say that we'd have to take care of private business as well. I think what we need to do is figure out how do we keep the firefighters we have. We're struggling to get good firefighters, new paramedics. We want to keep the good firefighters we have. I think this would be a way to say to the firefighters, hey, we see what you're going through. We appreciate, I don't know the percentage, I could be making this up, but 60% of firefighters potentially got COVID in Attleboro throughout the course of COVID. These folks were driving people to the hospital from their homes with COVID cases. I just think that this is one way that we can say, hey, we do value you. We want to keep you. And I think it'll help the chief get to the staffing levels he wants to. And let me just say this. I haven't had a conversation with Chief LaChance about this. This is my own thoughts, my own feelings that I think we need to do more to incentivize the men and women of the fire department to stay. We lost 7 with not counting retirements in the last year. That's scary. The fact that we might have to, and Chief, I don't think you were fear-mongering at all. I've known you for 12 plus years. You don't fear-monger. You're very straightforward, and I appreciate that. The concept that we might have to close a fire station to 2 because we can't put ambulances on the road and get people where we need to, that's a very scary concept in 2022 and going forward. So that's where I'm coming from on this, Jeremy. I appreciate your standpoint. The last question I have, Chief, you talk about in your 2023 objectives, address longstanding lack of co-ed facilities at the fire stations. What would your estimated cost be? Because I think that's an extremely important objective for this fiscal year to finally address.
Unfortunately, that's a tough question to answer because back in the day, it was different in terms of getting prices for things. Today, everything's going out to bids, and we have to hire architects to look at the stations now. We couldn't get a contractor to come in and give me a price to renovate something because it would be over the threshold that would require us to do all these bidding processes.
Mm-hmm.
But a ballpark figure, if I'm just taking a guess, is that fire headquarters is the worst building in the city. That's not even debatable. It's 125 years old. And we do the best we can to maintain it, but the reality of it is it's not designed very well. It's small. We have men and women cohabitating, living in pretty much the same areas.
Yeah.
We do not have co-ed bathrooms in 3 of the fire stations. We don't have co-ed living quarters. And I want to be clear that this is a new problem. And it's not a new problem. I've spoken to Mayor Hero about it, and he's actually been supportive of putting some money at it. The problem is that it's not as simple as that. Really, we actually have to have RFPs and designers and stuff. And I've actually had some conversation with Carol Brown about putting that together. It's just unfortunately all of these things take a lot of time. But if I had to take a guess, I would say if you threw $500,000 at the stations, you could probably make a fair improvement to the living quarters.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Jeremy Stoll, you have the floor.
Thank you. Both of these things kind of both my comments wrap into both of Councilor Delicio's. So totally agree on the needing to incentivize either financially and some to firefighters. My concern with doing the premium pay piece is that it kind of becomes the short-term Band-Aid, right? It's only good for the next 18 months or whatever it is. That I would like to see some structural negotiated changes that we can sustain as a city rather than have this short-term infusion of cash that would then, dries up after the end of the year. So your point is extremely well taken. I just don't know that ARPA is the right source for that.
Be a good thought though, Jeremy, and that was my point, is a little thank you for everything they've done over the last year and a half, 2.5 years of this pandemic.
Yeah, understood. Also on ARPA, we're looking at being able to, increase public health and public facilities, and that means some more isolation separation spaces, some increased HVAC capacity. So we are looking at, as part of this process of upgrading the personal quarters within within the fire department, is using ARPA money to do some of that. So we think that is a good and eligible use of ARPA funds. And lastly, just to give the committee an update, since you and the full council an update, since you all funded it, the Municipal Building Commission shortlisted 4 design firms for the public safety feasibility study last night, and they'll be interviewing those design firms next Wednesday. So we're hopeful that shortly, if that's in June, that in July we can get a contract, and before August get that kick-started to see what the next generation or iteration of public safety facilities in Attleboro is. So I just want to let you know that that's off and running. That's all.
Council, may I ask a follow-up?
Go right ahead.
Thank you. So Jeremy, you said that the plan is to use some of the ARPA money for some of the repairs and upgrades. Wouldn't it make sense to address this where we need to at this point? I think that we're potentially in a vulnerable situation if we don't get these co-ed facilities addressed. And if we have the avenue in order to be able to do that through ARPA, I think we should be looking to get as much of it done as we can using those funds that are at our disposal.
Yeah, I said part because I don't think additional restroom facilities are eligible under the public building, decreased community infection in public buildings. I forget the total category now. That's why I said some, that the HVAC and the sleeping and living quarters we believe are eligible, but doing things like restrooms I don't think are. So it would have to be a combination of funding to be able to get to it.
I appreciate that clarification. Thank you.
So does anyone else have any questions for the chief? Counselor, I'm sorry, I think of you as a counselor, but your name is Deb Gould. You have the floor.
Thank you. So 2 things. I believe there's been some change in the approach of what the city's going to use some of the ARPA funds, or how we're going to use it and report it as revenue loss, which changes some things, not greatly, but given that I have to go back and read a bulletin from DOR to see what action will be necessary from the council. So that is to come at some point in the not too distant future, I would expect, because it was a recent change when we just had to do the most recent filing in April, I think it was. And to be honest, I'm a little bit behind. So that's to come. And then tonight is the first night that I've ever heard anybody talk about enterprise fund for EMS. So if it's something that the chief wants to look into further, obviously it would involve the administration, but it, and mapping things out and stuff like that. I just wanted to give the council realistic, that's not something that would happen overnight. So, I mean, if it's something that we research over the course of the next year and come up with a plan and that kind of stuff, it is potentially something that could always happen. But there are rules relative to enterprises funds. All sorts of things would have to be reviewed, checked, make sure that it's the most appropriate course of action to take for not only the city, but for that particular enterprise, right? So it's certainly a conversation that if the chief is like, hey, we really need to at least start having that conversation, then I'm sure Jeremy and the administration is something that we can at least talk about. I don't want you to think that it's not something that we'll talk about to the council, but it is something that could not happen super quickly. So that's it. That's what I have. So there's more to come. And if there's any research that the chief wants to discuss with me or on that, I'm happy to make myself.
Well, we just lost your video, Deb.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Anyone else have any questions for Chief? and Assistant Chief Gwinnett, thank you for your enormous contribution to this meeting.
The chief didn't need me.
I'm glad you have a sense of humor. I'm sure everything that was said by the chief you would have said. And it's nice to see you participating because I like succession planning, and it's good to know what this is like. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Have a wonderful evening. Chief, we'll be talking soon because I got to write a budget message and I'm going to need some help.
Okay, Rick, can I just say one quick point before I go?
Yes.
So I just wanted to make it clear because I know sometimes people hear things, they hear little bits and pieces. I don't want anybody to think that I'm saying that there's a risk that we don't have an ambulance service tomorrow or next week or in the next few years. I feel like I'd be negligent in my duties if I don't let everybody realize that if we don't really look at this, it's going to be a problem in, 4, 5, 6 years. But for right now, we're okay. We're okay today. We'll be okay for the next year. Regardless of what happens with this budget, we'll be able to make it work. But I do have concerns that are now based on 10 years of data that's not really, you can't really ignore it, that if we keep doing the same thing and expect different results, that's the definition. That's insanity. And we shouldn't expect different results if we're going to keep doing the same thing.
And Chief, that's exactly why I started talking to you about this on April 15th, because I wanted to be prepared for this discussion tonight. And you're right, we have to address it. And the council has to get behind the effort to address it. And hopefully we will.
And, sometimes the answer isn't positive. Sometimes municipalities have to look at a reduction in service if that's the only option. I'm certainly not advocating for that, but I think that as adults that are all have, we're all part of the process here, and that we should all be looking at this in the future to make sure that we can do everything we can to not get at that point that I have to come to the council someday and say, try to explain why we had to do something that nobody wants to do. So that was the intent behind my message, and I hope that it was received that way.
And I'm hoping we can avoid that day.
Me too. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. So up next is Protective Services, Building Inspection, William McDonald. I can see you, Will. I can see you're not muted. That's good. Let me just give you a little overview. We have been asking the department heads to just review the financial pressures that are having a big impact on your budget. And I see in your comments that you have an overtime thing. So obviously personnel is an issue with you, like it is with just about every department head that we've spoken to in these budget reviews. But I don't want to put words in your mouth. I want you to have that opportunity to deliver the message yourself personally. You have the floor, Bill.
To be quite honest with you, I don't know what you mean by that you have a note there about overtime. I don't have any problems with my overtime.
So Bill, you're asking for a $500 increase in overtime to reflect the volume within the office.
Well, there was over the past few years, I used to have $2,000 in there. It went down to $1,000 a couple of years ago. And to be quite honest, when I looked at my my budget sheets, I put 2,000 because that's what I had in there. That's what I thought I had in last year, and I had 1,000. So I think that Jeremy and I just we split the difference and put it at 1,500. I don't really. I mean, $1,500 is quite a small amount of overtime, and you get right down to it. I do most of the. If there's any overtime, it's usually me that handles it. So that I don't go into budgetary dollars. I don't pay myself overtime. If I get called out, I'm the one that the police, the fire, anybody calls. If I have overtime, I used a bunch of overtime a few years ago because we had a sick employee that was in the hospital for a year. And so we covered for him. And that was where we ended up using a lot. That 1,500 is like I said, I can 2,000, 1,500, or 1,000. It's not a big deal to me.
So, Bill, what financial pressures are you seeing on your department?
I don't really have any financial pressures, to be quite honest with you. I have workload pressures, but that just comes with the business. It's been a busy 5 years, let's say, and the pandemic didn't help us, but we really didn't lose much time with any help. We didn't have much COVID in our office, and we still plugged away every day. So we did pretty well with it. Now, financially, I think that we're running pretty smooth. I think you can see by basically an even ask from last year, so to speak. And I think that moving forward, there'll be some. I am going to be requesting some changes next year with some of my staff. I don't know if you'd really want to get into that right now.
I don't
but-
think we need to, Bill.
Okay.
We're really looking at this budget
Mhm.
and what the finance committee needs to hear is what is the environment you're working under? So you hinted at your building inspection volume has not decreased with the recent changes in the economy. The supply chain problems don't seem to have slowed down your building permitting.
No.
You are a major contributor to the budget in permits and fees on an annual basis. And here we see them. You know, you've gone from $460,000 in building permits in 17 to 479 in 2021. So, you know, you're increasing. The plumbing's down a little bit, mechanical is way up. And so from the bottom line, you're consistently delivering about 6, 7, 8, oh my gosh, 2020, 910,000. That's a major year.
In that year, we also, we waived all of the high school fees in that year as well. It was about $1 million. So that money would have been quite, yeah, I mean, in the last 3 years, we've waived, I mean, even last year alone, we waived over $300,000 in fees. And this year, we waived over $110,000 in fees.
Well, it's an important part of our budget, and you know, I recently voted against waiving fees for a nonprofit because I believe the city needs its income from all sources, and I see you're forecasting for 23 $568,766 in fees, and that's, you know, that's a nice conservative number. I think you're probably going to be over 7 again next year the way things are going.
I wouldn't be surprised, right?
You wouldn't be surprised either, yeah. So after 5 years of this escalated volume, I like hearing that you're thinking next year you might want to make some changes because it doesn't look like things are going to slow down. What I want to know is there anything that's getting in your way for you to be able to deliver that income to the city?
No, quite honestly, just the opposite. I don't, my staff is great. Anything that I do need, which typically is not much, I get very good cooperation with. And like I said, you know, we're a pretty well-oiled machine over here, and we enjoy doing what we're doing. Believe me, I like to see the numbers up. I mean, it can be a struggle at times for us because of the sheer volume, but I got to tell you, the implementation couldn't have come at a better time for our online permitting in 2017, because if we were doing things the way we were doing before, there's no way we'd be able to keep up. The numbers that you see from 17 on, from 460 up till, I mean, we're already past the 500,000 mark this year in building permits alone. We're at 700,000 now at year to date.
So you're running about 2,000 building permits a year?
Well, the number of permits a year, it might even be more than that.
Yeah.
Might even be more than that.
Well,
but to do that all by hand.
Yeah, that software saved your life.
Oh, it really did.
Yeah.
And during COVID, could you imagine what we would have had to do, because we couldn't let people in the building? Things would have been either coming in by mail or drop off, or it would have been a nightmare. And we quite literally did not miss a beat during COVID.
And taxpayers, contractors, developers all like being able to do it online.
Yeah, especially if City Hall's closed, because, you know, everybody was closed for a period of time. We were still being able to work it from home and do all the things that we were able to do. So it really did come at the opportune time.
So are you seeing any big projects coming into the city in the recent quarter?
Yeah, well, yes, I know that the fishnet building was one of those buildings. not really sure where we're at with that now. But there's always something around the corner. There always is. And
That's how Julie's pulling $800,000 of growth a year.
it's true. I mean, with marijuana facilities, there's still some of those going through the process and the special permits and things like that are going on. I hear that there is next to the skating rink is something that's starting up where Mars Seafood was before.
Oh, good.
There's going to be, that big residential project where the golf thing is. So there's quite a bit. Every time we turn around, there's something else going on.
So Catherine DeSimone, I see your hand is up. You have the
Yes.
floor.
Thank you, Council Conti. Hey, Bill.
Hey, how are you?
Good, thank you. In regard to the fees, with what frequency and methodology do you review the fees? Because it looks like they haven't been increased in a while. Am I right?
Well, I think Jeremy and I spoke a little bit about that when we had our budget meeting, and I was going to go through it. The thing with the fees is I have gathered an awful lot of information in the last 2 months from surrounding towns and cities not so surrounding, but similar to us. And the majority of the fees are pretty much where they should be, with the exception of the smaller fees, the minimum fees for homeowners, small roofs and decks and things like that. We have fees, the minimum fee is $30 for a building permit, and that's up to $6,000 worth of work. That's really low. That doesn't even really cover the cost of the 1 or 2 inspections that happen, but we make it up on the other end. So, I've always looked at the fee schedule as tough when you're bringing in this amount of money on a budget that we have, the reasons for increasing some of the fees. I've gone over this with the mayor in the past couple of years, and actually with Mayor Dumas beforehand. And it's always a catch-22 to ask for more money when you're making so much money. But I think in those instances, there is some room for a little bit of improvement.
Yeah, because it's been several years, right?
It's been a while. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Councilor Conti.
You're welcome. Deb Gold, you had your hand up? No? Well, you're muted, Deb.
I
We can't hear
did,
you.
sorry. The inspection office was the first office that has permitized, which is with the inspection fee. The inspections office uses the online system. I know that we had talked about the upgrade to permitized, going to permitized 2020, and there was an opportunity that we might be able to fund a portion of that with a grant before June 30th. It was something that just came up recently that we might be able to maximize that use. Bill or Jeremy, do either of you know if that made the communication when I was out? I don't remember seeing it, and I'm just concerned that, and this is a good opportunity to say to the council, like, if we're able to put that together before year end, that might be something that comes down if it hasn't already.
No, it has not.
Okay, it might be on the 6-7 communication.
I will work on it. I know we were also having larger communications internally that Deb, you've been a part of them as well, about upgrades to a larger suite and modules within Permitize.
Yeah.
And I think that larger discussion ended up bogging down the Permitize 2020 upgrade. They got linked, and I don't necessarily think they have to be linked. So yeah, we can work on those independently.
Yeah, just so the council knows, there, Catherine Farrick had an opportunity in one of her grants that had been previously approved by the council that she might be able to dedicate a small portion of that grant to some technology upgrades. And one of the upgrades that we identified that could probably maximize it most quickly would be to upgrade the inspections office suite on that particular platform up to the next level. So carve it out of everything else if we can maximize that. So we'll touch base with Catherine. I think she could contribute like maybe $5,000 of a $12,000 project. So there'd be about $7,000, $7,500 that we'd need for an appropriation that the mayor was made aware of. And I just don't want that to get lost. So I'm gonna go looking for that. So that's the only question I had, Bill.
Yeah,
So-
that upgrade is it's just like upgrading a computer. It upgrades the platform. Everything works the same. It's just a little bit more user friendly and just a newer platform for it. So everything is still the same. But it's a little easier program to use, so to speak. I've seen it and I've worked with it.
So
Okay.
Bill, I'm on Permitized 2020 in Taunton. I absolutely love it. But it's different in Taunton. In Taunton, the assessors actually go out and look at buildings. You know, so yeah, what I love is being able to see the whole history of the permits on the software. It's fabulous software. I'm sorry, I'm off subject. Is there anyone else who has a question for Bill? Bill, it's only Jeremy. Jeremy, you have the floor.
I just wanted to, Councilor DeSimone had said the fee schedules hadn't been updated in quite a while. The ordinance was last updated in June of 2013, which set the building permit fees. Wanted to, point of information.
So Council DeSimone, I made a note. We'll get it into the comments so that it can at least get some attention. Is there anything else that anyone has for the building inspection? Seeing none, Bill, thank you for number two things, Bill. Thank you for wanting to appear in the finance committee hearings because not everybody has your attitude. Thank you very much. And number two, thank you for joining us even at the last minute, at the last time, because this is a great opportunity, and I'm glad you participated. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. I'll always take the opportunity to speak with you guys.
Super. And I appreciate that hearing because I was thinking earlier in this process that maybe we would change things in the future, that maybe the budget sessions should be between the council and the finance team rather than all the department heads. But, you know, with the addition of Zoom and you being able to participate wherever you are, plus the fact that it's the one time a year that you really get an opportunity to address the council. I'm thinking that maybe it's best to stick with this format in future years. So I appreciate the comment, Bill. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Okay, so thank you, Bill.
Okay, thanks.
Committee members, that would be Councilor Cobus and Councilor Delicio. This brings us up to a wrap. I've got the Finance Committee minutes up on my screen and they're complete as of now. I'm going to work on a budget message over the next week and put together a draft to circulate to you for your comments in advance to our committee meeting. And if you would take some time to isolate the things that you really want to see in that budget message, I would appreciate it. Same for other counselors. Thank you for participating in the budget sessions. Sometimes you can learn a lot in these sessions, and I'm happy that you took the time out to do it. It's time consuming, but it's a big city. There's a lot going on, and there's a lot to learn. And I'm still learning every day. There's just there's too much going on. So, Councilor DeSimone.
Sorry, Rick. Can we email you suggestions for items in the budget message, or do you want me to put them on the record right now, or?
I think, yes, Councilor. You can do that because you're not on the committee.
Okay.
But committee members can't do that because it has to be an open forum among committee
Understood.
members. So for Councilor Reynolds and Councilor Cobus, you're going to have to make a list yourself. And I'm going to present you with my draft budget message before so you can make your notes. Councilor Cobus, you have a question?
I do. Thank you. First and foremost, I have a comment, and well done with these meetings. It's been well run. When is our next committee meeting?
It's going to be the second Tuesday in June.
Okay, so we don't have a special meeting at all next week to prepare this.
No, next week is a regular meeting.
Right.
I'm hoping that I'll have a draft budget message for that regular meeting to circulate to you. Frankly, it depends on a few things that are going on over the next 4 days. I've taken a lot of notes in my book, but a lot of my notes I don't think are going to make it into the budget message. The minutes are going to reflect that during our meetings, really no decisions were made, during our meetings. It was really information gathering only. I don't know, just like the old capital improvements messages, historically they haven't gotten much traction, but I do want future generations who may want to look back in the past to this time to see what was on our minds. I want to document, how we feel, and as to your comment, thank you for the compliment for running the meetings, but I'm going to pass that compliment right over to Council Delicio, because when I was sitting on the budget committee last year and the year before, he really set a pace that was well worn, and I thought did an excellent job as a budget director, and frankly, I'm just trying to emulate. It's that simple.
I appreciate the kind words, Rick. You did a fantastic job.
It's
Fantastic.
not a small job, Counselor.
Not at all.
It's not a small job. To know the questions to ask the department heads in a 15-minute period takes a lot of preparation. That's all I'll say. And I'm happy to do it. I learned a lot this year. I learned a lot. Yes, Counselor?
It just, because I do enjoy the meetings where we draft the budget message and work through that. If you would be open to it, I'm available on either Wednesday or Thursday night next week to have a special committee meeting, but I'll just wanted to put that out there.
That's an excellent idea, sir. And we could do that on Zoom. And I will make it so. So that would be June the 8th.
Wednesday the 8th?
Wednesday the 8th. You want to do that at, you want to do it early or later?
Later is better for me, but
yeah, me too.
I can do anytime after 5:30.
Yeah, 5 o'clock's a stretch for me. I got to push people out of my office, and let's say 6 o'clock.
Perfect.
Okay, 6 p.m. I will make that so. And I'll invite all other councilors to join us as we craft away our message. But I'll set that up as a special meeting on the Finance Committee at 6 o'clock on Zoom, June 8th. Thank you for the contribution on that. And with that, Councilor Deb Gould, you have the floor.
Sorry. So if you want to reach out to me, you had a question on the Schedule A.
I do,
Part
and we're going
one.
to do that offline. We're not going to do it here.
So you'll reach out to me on those things. And then if there's any counselors that have any specific questions on the budget that I can help with, don't hesitate to reach out. If I don't know the answer, I might be able to find us the answer and then get that information to you. And Councilor Conti, you had asked me for some information relative to snow, so I will get that to you.
Yes, that's an important part of the budget message. And Deb, I'm also expressly inviting you to join us June 8th at 6 o'clock on Zoom. If you would please put that in your calendar.
I already did. I don't expect that to be at all a problem.
You will be our special guest.
Oh, how exciting.
Yes.
So yeah, no, I'm happy to attend. So I will, I'm sure I'll talk to you before then. But
yes, you will
any of
be
the
talking.
councilors have any questions,
we will
please don't
talk several
hesitate to
times
reach
between
out.
now and then. So with that, I'd like to entertain a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
Thank you. Motion's in order. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I declare the Finance Committee, which originally was called to order on 5:01 May 25th, to be adjourned on June 2nd at 7:43. Thank you all for participating, and I hope you have a wonderful evening, what's left of it.
Thanks, you too.
Good night.
Thank you. See ya.
Oh, man.